Don't yell. Maybe.
Nick, can you hear me?
Yeah. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Oh,
So
it makes so much sense. I didn't realize my fucking actual mic was set up, and it's like 5 feet away.
I'm going to welcome you, Elijah, and all of our listeners to the Bladeology Podcast. Today we're doing the NCC Knives Nick Chiprin interview. He's a friend and co-conspirator on this podcast. We've got a multitude of questions for him from our own annals of history and from the community. And I think we're going to dive right into it tonight. Elijah, do you have a question for Nick?
Yeah, I would like to know, Nick, how did you get started in knife making? How old were you? What year was it? Take us through the landscape.
So back in, I guess, 2009, I heard about the New York Knife Show. Went over there, checked it out. I was like 13 years old. Pretty much walked in there, did one lap around, and my brother wanted to go home. And that's what got me started. For about the next year, I was kind of doing research and deciding, do I get a Sabenza? Do I get a Strider? Because back then, all that really mattered was who was better, Sabenza, Strider, or Hinderer. And they all had their own little fan groups. Then I went back to the show the next year, and I ended up getting one of each at that point, and that's when I got into customs. And for about 2 years, I was collecting and decided to become a maker because no one made compound tantos. So the majority of my designs are compound tanto ground folders. The only ones that really made them back then was John Barker. Those are pretty much impossible to get. And kind of once in a while, the maker would make a one-off. Like I had a Les Voorhees back then. I still have it, but it was a one-off he made. He doesn't really grind them that way or make that design. And I always wanted a Bob Lum, but they're completely out of my price range and really hard to get. A Lum Tanto.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's still one of my grails. At some point, I'll get one, but they're like I've only seen one, maybe two, but I think I've only seen one in person. Pretty rare.
Yep,
and that's what just got me. Yeah, that's what got me into it. I just started doing it as a hobby. I was like, my goal is to figure out how to do this grind, and I ground about 50 knives and never finished one because I was like, I want to figure out this grind. Eventually, I figured it out, and I went right into folders. The moment I figured out that grind, I just jumped into folders.
And you're all self-taught, right?
Yeah, that's impressive.
Back then, it was self-taught. I live in Brooklyn, New York, so there's not really shop space. I was just given a 4x4 table, and that was my shop. Everything that fit on a piece of 4x4 plywood on top of a kitchen cabinet, that was the shop until Hurricane Sandy hit. Then I lost that shop, and I was still a hobbyist. Even at that point, I had the shop for about a year, and just because I just kept practicing grinding, I made about 100 fixed blades that never got done. Just if the grind wasn't right, just kept throwing it aside, and I made maybe one folder. Then the shop was destroyed, and I really decided, do I want to put money back into a shop or what? And at that point, I just decided, okay, let's go figure this out. Let's go take a break from school, and I ended up moving to Jersey and rented out space at New Jersey Steel Baron. And that's when I went full time. I was like, I guess let's just go from nothing to figure this out full time. And it just took off, thankfully. Started making folders full time now 4 years. And still making them now, so it's working. The flagship model is the MK1. That's why it's called MK1. Been making it to this day. And for some reason, it keeps happening. Every time I try to make a new design, my water jet makes me the wrong handles or something, and it just keeps bringing me back to this MK1. I've been trying to retire it for almost 2 years now, but it keeps calling back into the production line, I guess.
It's just
popular model.
It's haunting you. That's the model that's the signature one. So just out of curiosity, when you said you and your brother went to Nick's, like, do you remember like the impetus for you going to it, like a knife show? Like I can't think of like being not a knife person and just being like, hey, like what's this weird knife show thing? Like, did you see a flyer or something, or like was it just like you heard
I think
about
Jafco told me about it. It wasn't the first experience with knives. My story how I actually got into knives is stupid. I was 13 years old, and something funny happened, and a knife was involved at a McDonald's. And I thought it was great, and what I thought was a Spyderco was not a Spyderco, and I ended up buying a Spyderco Tenacious because thinking it was the same knife, and it wasn't. And then I got into like YouTube videos. I think I saw Gavco's and Tough Knives videos back then. And then I met Gavco at a get-together, and he told me about the show. And I went with my brother. And my brother didn't want anything to do with it, so we kind of went in and out. I just got to see everything really quick within an hour, and then we left. And that's where the downhill spiral started, pretty much.
It's just interesting to like. It's definitely the community, even though sometimes we're unaware of it, is so much larger and more ingrained into like the outer spectrum than we think it is. Because I mean, like you were originally, introduced through Gavco or through whoever in the community, and then figured out about Nick's. That's pretty cool.
Question: how do I sound? Because for some reason on the soundboard here, it's showing like 1 or 2 bars out of 10.
You sound great.
I sound great.
Okay, so it was bugging me out here.
Yeah.
So, Nick, were you a collector at all? Like a hardcore collector of folders, like tactical folders, before you started making knives?
Oh yeah, I've been hustling from different businesses, and as long as I can remember, I think my first business, I was like 10 years old, and I was doing mod work on Xboxes and PlayStations, changing out lights and soldering and all sorts of things. So when I was young, I had a good amount of money to get into the hobby. Like the first big investment that I had into a knife was I think it was that Les Voorhees. I think it was that Les Voorhees. It was about $750. I was like 14 years old, and after that, it was just down. It all went downhill. Before that, I had the Strider, the Sebenza, and the Hinder, and I think my second New York knife show, I got lucky and won 3 Hinders.
Oh,
and and back then, if you remember, the guys have been in this for a while. $380 Hinder was about $1,000 on the secondary.
That was the bee's knees back then.
Yep.
Yeah, so I went from about $1,000 to $3,000, and that's how I built that first shop. That's what got me into knife making. It was $3,000, and I bought me a compressor, a grinder, a drill press, hand tools, and a manual mill, and a sandblast cabinet. But I got those 3 knives, and I was like, okay, cool, let's go. I know I could make something on them. I didn't realize how much, because that's it for the guys that have been at the New York show or the Blade show or whatever. You guys saw their lotteries, and their lotteries were pretty out of hand back in the day. A couple hundred guys just standing around trying to get those 25 knives that he brought, because he didn't sell them to the public back then.
Now, at your first Nick show, was there anybody you were there to see that you were excited to see? Obviously other than Hinder and Strider, was there anybody else like on your radar, or was it you went to go check that out?
Not that first show. I was 13. I was in and out, and I wasn't I didn't really know much about the customs. Like my goal then was like the average Joe that gets into it. Like my goal was I want to own one of every Spyderco, and back then there was like 12 Spyderco.
Yeah, there were a lot less of them.
Yeah. There was kind of like every
400.
Yeah, it was a little different. So like you wanted to get the 3 sizes of the Tenacious, the Ambitious, the Resilience, the Para 2, Endura, Delica, and then there was like maybe 2 or 3 more. So there wasn't many options. I was like, I want to get one of each. And then I went to the show, and that's when I realized there's a whole handmade thing. And that's where the whole hobby changed for me, because I was really into working with my hands. I used to do a little bit of woodworking because of my father, and I just wanted to work with my hands. And that was the thing too. And when I was going to school, I was like, I wanted to go for engineering because I thought I was going to be able to work out in the field. And once I actually got into school for engineering and realized that it's more of a desk job, and that's what made me drop out and let's just try knife making for a couple of years. But like you asked if I collected. I collected pretty hard from 14 to about 17. And when I was 17 is when I went full time the first year of college. And when I went full time, I sold off everything but about 2 of my. I at all times I rotated between 6 and 7 customs. Anything more than 6, I would have to sell one because my Pelican case was 6. So whenever I got a 7th or 8th, I had to sell 1 or 2. So that was kind of my rule. So that way I'm always not getting out of hand with it.
That's a good governor to have only a 6 carry case. It's like I can only buy 6 knives.
And my rule back then too was 6 knives, and then if I was only able to keep it if it was less than $1,000.
Yeah.
If anything I bought over $1,000, I'd always get a buyer's remorse, and then I would always sell it.
Mm-hmm. So when you first started, you were with a manual mill. How long did you work with that until you switched over to CNC?
Oh, about 5 years.
Okay,
I had a manual mill since I was like, this is 14 years. Yeah, so 14. Right after the New York Custom Knife Shows, and I built that first shop. I was 14, and I got a manual mill. I was 18. So yeah, about 4 years, I guess. I went through about 3 different manual mills, getting a big one each time. And then when I was 18, right before I left the New Jersey shop, is when I got the Haas.
So yes, there were Grizzly, right? Grizzly manual.
First I had the Harbor Freight one for like $500. It was a little red machine. Yeah. Then I had a Grizzly GO704. It was a little bigger. And then once I moved to Jersey, we ended up combining our money together and buying a slightly bigger mill, which is probably the biggest mill you could get before Bridgeport. It was like a Precision Matthews.
Yeah, they make a good one.
Numbers. Yeah, but a couple of manufacturers make it, but it's pretty much it's an X3 size. So there's like X1, X2, X3. Mm-hmm. It was the biggest manual mill before you start talking about floor units.
Yeah, like a standard table.
So just in case, for people out there, obviously CNC is computer controlled, but a manual mill. Nick, can you give us just a quick breakdown of exactly what differentiates, obviously, a manual mill from a computer controlled mill?
Essentially, it's pretty much looks like a drill press, except the drill press is designed for only downwards pressure. A manual mill is designed for downward side load and whatever way. So it looks like a drill press head, except there's a table that moves in the X and Y axes, and the head also moves in the Z. So the head moves up and down with a crank, and the table moves to the left, right, back and forth, also with a crank. So you're usually walking in one direction and not doing circles or moving at angles, or else you have to spin both handles together, and that you just accurately can't do that. And that's the nice thing about CNC. You're not really limited by an axis. It could do circles, arcs, whatever it wants to do, as long as you program it right. Manual mill is you just kind of move in one direction, and it's all about the fixtures and the setups. And I just had a knack for seeing a fixture and a setup. A lot of guys back in the day knew when I was making knives, I was doing a lot of interesting milling because I had a lot of jigs and setups. And even to this day now, with the CNC, I still get pretty intricate with the fixturing, but it's not as important because the head moves whichever way. But like for my grinders and other tools I have in my shop, everything's kind of custom built and set up for dedicated tasks.
Okay, so it's a manual mill is still a 3-axis mill.
Oh yeah, but you could add just axes doesn't really mean much, but how manual mill sits, it's 3 axes. But you could add a rotary table sideways. Now that's a 4th axis or whatever it is. It's just another degree of motion.
Gotcha.
So I take it you're not much of a grinder fan, because it seems like a lot of knife makers I talk to, they're all about the grinder. But you seem like you're more about the mill and the fixturing, and more so of pre-planned manufacturing.
Well, it's not necessarily about the grinder. I've always had one grinder, the Uber grinder, and I always said if you have little knowledge of building machinery and modifying machinery, you buy one of those nicer $3,000 grinders that do it all. And I didn't have the space, so I also bought that one because it did it all. And now that I have the space, I just bought 2 new grinders that are basic, and I had to buy another 2. And these grinders, opposed to being $3,000, they're about $600. But like I said, I build a lot of my custom work rests and setups and jigs and fixtures, even for the grinders. So like you have the space, I rather have 4 $600 grinders for the same price as a $3,000 grinder, and have each one for a dedicated task instead of spending half my day flipping the grinder, setting it up with wheels or flat platins or work rests, where I could just walk up to that grinder and it's set up just for, let's say, grinding my bevels or just for sharpening.
Yeah, wheels, horizontal versus vertical. Yeah.
Yep.
That
makes sense.
That's jumping ahead a little bit, but we were gonna ask about process, and like building a knife and like where to start from. But let's sort of get into that. So you're talking about dedicated grinders doing specific tasks, opposed to a single grinder doing all your tasks. So take us through some of your process and the whole. You design a knife and you.
So essentially, most of my designs, as odd as it seems, have actually started on bar napkins.
That's a good way to start.
Yeah, I like that.
I can relate for sure.
All good things start there. Okay.
Yeah, I'll honestly 3 out of 5 of my folder designs to start on the bar napkin. I'll just be at a bar with some friends, we're just sitting bullshitting, and I'll just start sketching with the pen in my pocket or a notebook or whatever, and take that back and just start going from there. I'll usually, since I'm drawing, I'll just do the profile. But then it goes into 2D CAD, and then you start building out the mechanism. And at this point, I have a couple folder designs, a couple working mechanisms. And now when I design something new, I'll just pull out the mechanism, being the lock faces on the lock faces, the stop pin tracks, and the pivot point, and I'll design out from there. Usually from the pivot point to the blade, and then from the pivot point to then the handle. And then once I have that, I'll design the middle portion where the handle meets the blade.
So so that's interesting. So when you design like your pod or your MK1 or your MK1L, are you designing handle for blade, or are you designing blade for handle? Like for usability, like an EDC, are you trying to maximize the amount of blade you can fit into a handle, or do you think about it being a user and just sort of going for it for the design with no limitations?
I usually design as an all-around knife. So I design it because it's a custom, to be fancy, to look good, to be a user. I don't really make just fantasy knives just for the looks or just overbuilt stuff for purely collecting reasons. Because I'm in this full time. So let's say I'm in it 40 years, 50 years. I feel like if you're making the fantasy knife or knife just to look good, it's following trends, and those change all the time. I'm trying to make designs that last the test of time.
Yeah, you're going for that timeless look.
Yeah, so also I design blade first, because I'm like, okay, what do I want to design today? A Tanto, a Warrenclyffe, a Bowie shape, or whatever. And like I said, I'll go from pivot to blade tip. Once I have my blade tip made, I'll design the outer profile of my handle. So then close the knife C to make everything as minimal, because I do try to make my blade to handle ratios as tight as possible. Same thing, just kind of a couple points. Blade to handle ratios have to be as tight as possible. The knife has to be designed to my manufacturing capabilities. Like, for example, my grinder, the smallest wheel I have on it's a 1/4 inch. So the tightest arc on the outside perimeter of the knife has to be no smaller than a 1/4 inch, or else I can't clean it up for a satin ground knife. Now, if it was a knife that, let's say I designed it to be production and everything's just gonna be sandblasted, tumbled, that doesn't matter. But all my folders are customs, so I have to design and be like, okay, well, if I need a satin finish, this has to get sanded. I can only sand things with a bigger than a 1/4 inch radius. And I'll see a lot of knife designs. I look at it, and I'm like, guys are just designing to design, and they're not thinking about manufacturing process. Like, when I'm making this knife, how am I going to make it? For example, you make a knife with a 90-degree corner. How are you going to clean that up with the grinder? You can't. Or else you can in a sloppy manner, but it's not going to be clean. And then when I close it, decide how much the tip should be inside the handle, outside the handle, and then I design the backspacer for the same way, as tight of a ratio as I can. I try to make the backspacer go as far down the spine as possible.
So no matter what you're doing, you're designing for absolutely function over form in a practical way, and like Elijah said, timeless. So a design that not only functions but is aesthetically pleasing now and in the future, which brings me to my question. When you're designing this, do you think about the lineage of your designs? Like you were saying, like you can't get rid of like the micro or like some of your other designs. Do you think about that when you're like, let's say 20 years in the future and you look back on these?
Not really, because all my stuff kind of looks similar. I'm a very, I guess, non-organic maker. I'm not into the all organic, a lot of curves. I like linear shapes. My favorite shape's a triangle. I just like straight things. So most of my designs are very linear and all chamfered and beveled, and sometimes contour, but I don't go for like crazy contouring. I like a lot of big bevels to them. So when you start looking at most of my knives, they're all very straight with a very usually 180-degree opening rotation. So like say from then the handle, the blade doesn't tilt downwards. It's kind of all almost straight and flow through. So they all designs kind of just they go on with each other. It's also not for everyone. A lot of people like heavily organic designs. It's just not what I'm into. And I make stuff that I like. I don't make stuff like, oh, what do people want right now? I make what I like, and I feel like I have a pretty. I don't have a very, I guess. Like my style, it's not just very for a couple guys. So like if I make 1,000 knives, it's not. Everyone would still like that design, like opposed to some guys that make very fantasy knives, and for the custom community it works because they're not going to make 1,000. They'll probably make 20 or 25, and they'll find the 25 buyers that really like super fantasy products. I guess like a non-user knife, but it looks great because it's something out of the ordinary you won't see on a production knife. which is the whole point of customs.
Right. You're definitely not. Yeah. You're not worried about people loving your stuff. There's enough knife makers out there. Somebody will find something they like, but you want to make something that just stands the test of time.
Stands the test of time is something I like. Like that's the reason I got into knife making. Was if I always say if I got into knife making today, well, if I got into knife collecting today, I would not be a knife maker.
Yeah, you'd be in trouble.
The reason I got into it was designs weren't like they are today, and what I wanted, and I strictly, out of the 6 knives, usually 4 of those knives in my collection were always a compound ground tanto, which were always very hard to find because pretty much no one made them. And my ideal knife was a compound ground tanto with a harpoon, and that just didn't exist. Like John Barker was pretty much one of the only guys doing that, and still he wasn't exactly what I wanted, and they were hard to get. So I was like, I'll try to figure it out myself. Now there's a lot of options close to that. There's a lot of guys doing similar work. So I probably wouldn't have had that motivation to figure it out myself. And I would have just bought them and just been a collector and been happy and probably been in school for engineering and made a smart decision and stayed in school.
That's the best catalyst to get something going is not finding what you want. I couldn't find anything I liked, so I had to make my own shit.
Just make my own shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that
in school.
Yeah, that Nick is a fan of Euclidean geometry. So a lot of straight lines.
That's fair. Yep.
Yeah. See, I didn't go to school. I don't even know what that means.
It's what you do.
That's your style. Your style is
In
like
contrast, basically what I do is like a lot of hyperbolic stuff. So.
Cool. I'm gonna start saying that and not knowing exactly what it means.
Just go with it, brother. It's
I'm just going with it. It sounds smart. Cool.
A little bit of a throwback. You did originally go to school for engineering.
Yeah, I was in engineering. I just got into the degree, but I was between mechanical and what was I even in? I don't even remember. I know mechanical. I think computer engineering too. But eventually, I found out that you don't get into the field until about 10 years into actually working for that degree. So I was like, I'm just gonna be a desk jockey for 10 years and hate my life. So I was like, well, just figure out knife making. I gave myself, like I said, I dropped out. I think I was 18. I dropped out fully because I was still kind of making knives, not full time, but as much as I can for sale. And I was 17 that first year. And then after I think my second Blade show, it just got insane with the amount of emails and demand. And I was like, look, I told my parents, I'm like, I want to drop out of school. I want to try this out for 3 years until I turn 21. If I don't see this as viable once I turn 21, I'll go back to school and just 3 years learning period. It is what it is. But at least I got to try what I wanted to do and gave myself a chance to work with my hands. And I'm about to be 23 and I'm still here. Not exactly where I'd want to be. So I gave myself a new goal for 23 and I'm pretty much about to hit it. So that's what I would usually always do. Every time I hit a goal, I set another 2-year goal and try to hit that goal and so on and so forth.
That's straightforward. I think having known you and talked with you, you're definitely business oriented, which I think a lot of knife makers struggle with. It is really important. You have to understand that this is a hobby that develops into an addiction, that develops into how to pay the bills, and it's something that you still love, and you definitely are aware of all of those things, at once.
Mm-hmm. I usually get a little angry when people say it's a hobby. Just throwing that out there.
Well, no, but I mean, as a collector, it's not a hobby. Yeah, as a collector, you're like, oh, it's a hobby.
Way of life.
Yeah.
Well, there definitely are hobby makers. About 40% of 30 or 40% of knife makers are hobby knife makers. They have full-time jobs. Yep. They make them on the side, and they usually just funds their addiction to collecting. So the wife won't let them spend $1,000 on a knife, and they have some garage space, and they'll make some knives themselves, and eventually they make some money from those knives, or they'll do some trades, and they'll get the customs they want to get. And a lot of times,
I think a surprising amount of our industry, the consumers and the casuals think that these guys are just like giant corporations or full time making these knives, when in fact it's just one guy in his garage with a drill press, and that's it.
Yeah, or in their basement. Yeah, killing themselves because there's no windows extracting the freaking toxic air that we're grinding.
Black Lung.
Yeah. The Black
heavy metal Black Burger Society, heavy metal poisoning. Titanium is very people don't realize how bad titanium is to grind because there's a lot of tungsten in it. So carbon fiber is bad, but I'd say titanium probably is worse to grind because
Really?
it's way easier than you think to get heavy metal poisoning. It's almost like lead poisoning. Once
From
you get
titanium?
Yeah, because it's high in vanadium, and vanadium is a heavy metal. So you grind it enough, and when I first started, I was like, I only wore masks with composites, and like if I was grinding steel or tie, I was like, whatever, I just won't take big breaths. But it's steel, I mean, it's a metal, so the dust settles, unlike composites where it kind of floats. And then I switched my doctors, and he asked me what do I do for a living. I'm like,
I'm a coal miner.
Yeah, I'm a knife maker, and it's a pretty toxic environment, but I try to use my PPE, my safety mask, my filters, and I'm not the best using steel and titanium. And he's like, titanium is really like dangerous. I was like, it's a metal. I said the same thing. I was like, it's metal, it settles. I just try not to take deep breaths. And if I'm grinding for a long time, I will wear my mask. But for like quick touching up a backspace or something, I didn't. And now I have vacuums and other filters in place.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've never seen you wear a mask ever.
I'll still I only put on my mask for carbon fiber.
Okay,
much.
or like you're saying like long-term grind or like contouring or something.
Long-term grind. If I'm just touching up with spacer, I won't put it on. But like you don't realize I have the vacuum system set up for my grinder, and I have the air filters in the grinding room.
Your grind room is pretty well set up too.
Yeah, I have a dedicated grinding room, kind of to self-maintain all that dirtiness. But before that, when I use even a backspacer, if I'm just touching it up, I'll wear a mask because I didn't realize how bad titanium was until I read up on it after my doctor mentioned it, and I was like heavily surprised. And I think like no knife makers know that.
Probably not. I mean, whatever, it's fine.
It's not common.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, we're all gonna like lose
wear your masks, people. Wear
masks. Wear your safety protection. It's important. So you have a few active models that our listeners may or may not be familiar with, associated with the MK1s, the pods, your Kiradashis. Tell us about some of your very early work, some of your groundbreaking stuff that we may not have seen that really helped propel you into where you are now.
Honestly, I just think it was the MK1. That literally is what started it all back in the day. And like I said, no one was really grinding stuff that way and in that kind of format. And if they did, they're usually very high in demand. They're hard to get. So when I started doing that kind of grind, that's exactly one of the reasons where I said it. Just after Blade Show, it just took off. I had a bunch of orders, way more than I could handle. And like every knife maker, usually they end up taking a bunch of orders, and then they realize I'm like, I'm booked for a year, and then you kind of start hating yourself because you're just working off this orders and you can't make what you want to make. And so I became, unfortunately, I'm one of the knife makers that take orders, but I figured out a system for it. I guess we're going to revisit this later when we talk more about like how my ordering system works in the process. Or should I talk about that now?
Well, Nick, I got a question.
Yeah.
Back to the MK1. Was that the first knife you designed, or?
Yeah, that's the first knife I did. Well, that was the first folder I designed, and that was kind of based on the fixed blade that I was practicing grinding on. Okay. It was the same blade, different handle. Yeah. That was I was originally going to go with the numbering system because just MK1, MK2, and then I realized if I do that, once I get past MK3, everyone's just going to get them confused. I was going to make it simple, and I think it's when the first Iron Man came out, is when I started designing, to be honest, because then he was using the mark numbers.
Yeah, I thought about doing that for a while. I was a big fan of that.
Yeah, but eventually when you have too many, it's like no one's ever going to know which number goes to which design.
No. I mean, you could do that up to a certain amount, but yeah, it's going to get crazy.
And then right after that, the second design I made, I was really into Norse mythology, and that's what I decided to go on. Like all my other models are called Valkyrie, Ragnarok, Loki, the Graham, Fafnir, and some of these I just named aren't even out yet, but like that's why I just kept going off the Norse mythology names. And that's probably where I'm going to stick to because there's tons of Norse lore that I could go off of. And they all kind of fall on top of that. Like the Valkyries, the Valkyrie's a Warncliffe, kind of looks like a Talon. And so it reminded me of a Valkyrie. Ragnarok just sounded cool, and it's pretty much World's End. And that was just the larger version of a Tanto that I did. Loki, that's the ballad song that I'm doing. Just seemed fitting to name it Loki. The Graham is a tiny 2-inch folder with a lot of lightning pockets to make it really light. And the Graham is pretty much a tiny sword that slayed Fafnir, which was a giant wolf. So I just kind of try to find. I look up like some of the Norse mythology books or just a whole bunch of Norse mythology terms, and I look at the definition, and I'm like, okay, that definition kind of looks like that knife design or something like that. So they all kind of have a meaning behind them. They're not just a random name that I picked out, except maybe Ragnarok. But besides that, the other ones all kind of fell behind the definition.
I can definitely relate to that because sometimes you might look at a name, it'll just give you an idea for a knife. But the name will come first.
Valkyrie is the second knife I ever designed, and right when I made it, I was like, that's a Valkyrie. And I think I was probably playing Halo back then, and Halo 3, for you guys to know, there's a map called Valhalla.
Oh, yeah.
And to be honest, I was probably playing Valhalla when I just finished that design, and I was like, Valhalla, I like Norse mythology, and I think that's how Valkyrie happened. Yeah, but I literally looked at that knife, and I was like, it looks like a claw, a Talon. What's a cool name for? Because Talon, there's a million knife designs like that. There's a lot of stuff named Valkyrie now these days, too. I think there was something else named Valkyrie back then, too. But there was like an axe. I don't remember, but that knife just spoke Valkyrie to me for some reason, and that's where the whole Norse thing started.
Cool. Any chance of designing a Mark II in the future?
Well, that was what the Valkyrie was going to be, but I just got away from that whole naming system.
Yeah, just kind of switched and evolved.
I thought about switching the MK1 name, but I was like, let's say it's my I guess you could say legacy was the first design. That's what started everything, and it also became the base of my knife designing style.
You got lucky right out of the gate and designed your first complete model was like the groundwork for your entire company, pretty much, which is pretty awesome.
Every knife I make, if I could put a harpoon on it, it's gonna have a harpoon. Every knife I make, or if I usually always start designing a Tanto, and I'm like, fuck, I love Tantos, but when you start doing this full time, you have to grind every week. Grinding Tantos day in and day out sucks because I'm very anal about the transitions of hollow to flat, and it's just money wise, you start losing money when you start getting super anal about it. But unfortunately, you have to be, and I have some simpler designs in the works where it's like not like for example the BBM project with Rob, that was great to grind because it was a Tanto that I didn't have to compound grind, so that was nice. Do you want to jump into the question about the Isham, like the Elijah Isham NCC knife collaboration stuff?
Just wait a minute on that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
No comment on that one yet.
Hold on. So as far as harpoon Tantos go, I mean, I feel like we should make a note about that. You were saying before how hard it was to find, and I really feel like that's a signature blade style for you. So would you easily say that you were the first person to do that style grind in a readily available circumstance?
Oh, readily available? Definitely not, because John Barker was probably readily available when he first started.
Okay. But after John, you were probably the second one.
I could somewhat confidently say that I was probably one of the first 5 guys to make that popular.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I could name 2, and that's I can only name 2, and I'm not going to say 3. So just in case, I could say 5. Right now, I could name like 25. So it's a big difference. But back then, I could probably name 2. So I'm just going to say one of the first 5. But
I feel like there's a lot of, like, having talked to you in the past, I feel like there's a lot of people that do it now, and I feel like you have expressed in the past, you're like, a lot of people, call me on it, and you have to correct them and be like, listen, bro, I was doing this like way back in the day. So I'm trying to give you credit now for being like, okay, like you were some of you were some of the first pioneers, for that harpoon Tanto.
There's, I once a lot of people say this or that. There's only one specific maker, which I get compared to a lot, but at this point, kind of stopped because people started realizing, really, with time dates, this and that. I ignore them. I'm like, look, I'm not gonna get into this. Just if you want, everything's on Instagram. You go back to 2014, right. You'll see me grinding this. Didn't look as good, but the general format was there.
Oh damn.
The DNA had been
2014.
Yeah,
of course.
Grinded. I was doing what I can, and eventually I got better.
Do you want to tell us the Brady story that you've sold in the past?
The Brady Monkey Edge?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. I always forget about
feel
this.
like that's a crucial. That's a crucial part of your.
Yeah, that's actually completely. Yeah, it's a big part of what it is. I completely forgot. So it didn't go from custom folders from custom collecting to making.
Right.
Before that, I was actually really big into the bead game because beads were pretty big back then. And back to nature, like I said, since I was 10, I was always hustling and trying to find some business that I could do. And I knew this guy who ran the CNC lathe, and I came up with a bullet bead design. It was just something I didn't really see. It was simple, and there's a lot of modifications I could do to it. And the gun community and knife community kind of overlapped. And I had this guy with the CNC lathe make me a bunch of 380 ACP, 45 ACP, and 9mm bullet beads in brass, copper, zirc, titanium. And I showed up to, I don't remember if I was 14 or 15. So I think I was 14 because I think it was the first time when I was 14, it was the first time I went to the New York Knife Show where I was able to go all 3 days and be there all day and talk to everyone because I took the train there. And I showed up there with bullet beads, nervous, and they were just titanium for the first batch. They were two-tone where I spent a lot of time figuring out how to mask them to where I could anodize the head and the body differently. And yeah, you could call it brown bagging. I was 14 years old. I didn't know about any rules, but I was just trying to show the people I make these. And they were done on CNC lathe, not by me, but I still had to hand polish them, anodize them. They were deburr and finish them. They were rough. They were pretty cheap. This guy was kind of just figuring stuff out, and I had to do a lot of work on them. But I was pretty proud of them. And I was walking around the show, showing them to everyone. They were great. And then eventually I hit Brady from Monkey Edge, and I showed him the beads, and he loved them. And I had a whole bag of them, about I don't know, about $800 worth. They were about $30 a pop. So I had a good amount. And walking around, I show him this. I pull out 4 different colors. He's like, "They're great. How many do you have?" I said on the bag's about $800 worth. I think there's 40, whatever is in there. I just knew it was about $800. He's like, "These work with my line. I love them. I'll take them all." And being 14 years old, I was amazed that someone wanted what I made and designed, and he took them all, and then he called me a couple weeks later. He's like, "Do you have more?" And of course I didn't, because he bought me out. So I didn't spend that money yet, and I took that $800 worth and reinvested and got more beads. At that time, I made another caliber size. I added zirconium, copper, brass, and then he took almost twice an order. I was twice as big, and then I got a little bit more confident in my stuff because I was nervous that first time. Then comes around the March show, because back then there was 2 New York shows, and then that's when I got more confident talking to dealers, and I figured out this whole dealer network. And I started approaching Blade HQ, Knife Center, and that's when I started, okay, this could be something more of a business. Mind you, again, I think at this point now I'm 15, still that whole business mindset where I could hustle. And then I started looking into knife making as a thing, and that's the show that I won the Hinders, and I had the money to buy those from the beads, and that's why I started buying knife making equipment. But for about 3 years, I was doing pretty good with those beads, and my plan was, how do I get people to know knives that I make? Because there was no Instagram yet. It was USN, and USN, it took some work to get known. Now on Instagram, you make a knife, looks decent, you're going to be known pretty fast. It's pretty easy to get to 1,000 followings on Instagram. Yeah. USN, you have to be active, be on the threads and Blade forums. You have to really put in work and grind and be active to get known. And you have to get your knives in the right people's hands. Nowadays, you just take some photos of your knives, and if they look good, you're going to get buyers. Back then, you needed someone to vouch for you or attend every show. So my plan was make these beads, talk to every dealer, and I think by the end of the first year, I had about 6 dealers that worked with me, and so my name was on every single one of the dealers' websites, all the bigger dealers back then, and that's where it all started. Eventually, these dealers like, "We love your products, they work great. What else do you have?" I was like, "Right now, nothing, but I'm working on knives." Cool. Once you make them, we want them. And I made my knives. The first one, I showed them to them. I was like, "Look, they're nice and all. I mean, like, they're not bad for my first knives, but I don't feel confident selling them to you guys because they're not that good. I'd rather sell these first 5 to people who've actually seen them in person." Like, great, cool. And then, like, after about 15 knives, I started working with dealers, and then I started realizing I don't like taking giving dealers cuts and commission, which is standard business practices. I just couldn't afford to give dealers a cut on the folders, so I started designing other products. And today I have the Kiradashi and the friction folder. back then, before CNC, I just had similar Kiridashis and other knick-knack knives, as I call them, water jet cut. They were simpler to make, but I still run stuff today. I make folders, and like I said, I try to run this as a business, and I wasn't never comfortable of just making custom knives because you don't really inventory them. You just make them, they go, or you're working off orders. So I was always worried about being sick for 2 weeks or something happening and me not being able to make money for 2 or 3 weeks. So it just made smart business sense to make, like I said, what I call knick-knack knives, just things that kind of are sitting on the website. Dealers have them, so once in a while a dealer calls you up, they take an order, or just weekly I sell a couple here and there on the website, and that just seemed like smart business practices, and I keep on doing that and just keep expanding my line of what I call inventory products, just standard products that I make every time I'm low. I make some more.
I always dig that story a lot because from multiple perspectives, it's like, you showed up with a product that you had put a lot of hard work into as a kid, and without even questioning it, I got to give it credit to Brady where credit is due. This is a good product. It doesn't matter, who the person is, how old they are, do I know them? Do they have experience in the community? It's a neat thing that he knew would sell and that he knew he had an audience for. And, I don't want to take credit as a dealer like that, but, sometimes that's why dealers work so well, is because they can take a product like that and expose it to, a large basis of people which you might not directly have had contact with. So, that's awesome that worked out so well for you in the beginning, and got that out there. Out of curiosity, do you still make that bead anymore, or when was the last time you made that?
I haven't made these beads in, I've had the CNC since I was 18. The last time I made the beads when I was a locksmith. So before I became a full-time knife maker, I was a locksmith. And I haven't been a locksmith in 5.5 years. So I haven't made the beads in 5.5 years. I still have some that just kind of been sitting in bags scratched up. And once in a while, I have like these 2 dealers that they do a lot of international business. And for some reason, beads are still really big in Japan and China. Huh. And every once a year, they'll call me up for an order. And like I said, they're just in the bag all scratched up. And whenever they call me up for an order, I'll sit there and refinish and polish them all out for their order. But I don't put them on my website. They're there. A lot of times, I'll say if I mess up and tell a guy I'm going to ship his knife out Monday, I ship it out Friday because I didn't finish as soon as I can, or something came up. I'll just throw it in the bag, and they're happy that they got something extra as a apology or something like that. They're just nice things to have around. Or someone visits my shop, or a friend of mine just wants something I made, I'll give them the bead.
Well, be prepared to get a lot of questions about them now.
Yeah,
told that story for sure.
Watch out about that.
I keep planning to sit down and refinish them to put them on my website, but it just beads were worth a lot more back in the day, I guess. And if I put them on my website, I feel like I have to cut the price.
Yeah, there was a bead bubble for a bit there, to be fair.
Yeah, and if I put them on my website, I have to cut the price down, and it's not going to be fair to those dealers because they still sell them at those same prices. That's kind of the reason why I don't put them on my website. They're just there, and I rather have them as like knickknacks and like same thing. Like if I ship out something late or something like that, I just rather have something
like a comp item.
Yeah, as a giveaway item.
Yeah,
because these things were paid off 4, 5, 6 years ago, and it's like they're just there. That's why I haven't put them on my website. Once in a while, if I make a guy a knife that has a copper or something like on it, or without, I'll throw it in there just because it matches.
Yeah. I was never really into beads on a knife. I always thought it would kind of mar the knife up, especially if it had a nice finish.
Oh, me neither. I never put them on anything. Yeah, I just
They're cool to have. Yeah.
I was 14 and I saw this is a business opportunity. Let's try it.
I like them. They're cool, but just not on knives.
Yeah. I have a keys. I think that's why I had the beads. I think I put them on my keys as a keychain to just show off.
So you guys want to get into some community questions? A little bit for Nick?
Yeah, sure. We covered like a third of them, but let's keep going through them.
Let's see. You want to go for it, Elijah?
Yeah. The Venerable Terra Fanatic would like to know what's the hardest steel to grind?
Hardened S110V.
Whoa.
Oh wait, no. Hardened S125V, which there's only been 6. It's the first ever collaboration me and Robert did. We made 6 or 7 of those MK16s. And that even covered the whole story of like how I learned folders. Well, on USN, I asked the question about detents again before Instagram days, and Robert just put down his number. He's like, "Give me a call. I'll answer your questions about detents." And we were on the phone for about 6 hours.
There we go.
Just
Yeah,
like
let's
a
get
cell
into
phone number?
how you guys like started working together.
Huh.
Yeah, I feel I should talk about that. It's a big part of my whole career. Like he left his phone number there. We called him. We talked for about 6 hours. Mind you, at this time, I guess I was 15, maybe 16, probably 15, going on 16. So I was young, and he gives this young dude his phone number. He gives him a call. Spend half the day on me at the phone, and the rest is history, I guess. Eventually, I taught him how to do CAD work, and he taught me folders. He pretty much taught me how to make folders over the phone.
Nice.
Then eventually we came up with the collab model. While the collab, I was showing him how to do CAD work. So he gave me his. We helped him design up his F-16 model into CAD, and I had my MK1 already designed at that time. So that there was one other. Actually, no, I didn't. When I designed my MK1, I didn't know about Robert. I met him on the USN, and that's one of the things that worked out because we had very similar design styles, even before we knew each other. So that's why a lot of our collabs work out because we literally just take the models that look similar and morph them. So we took his F-16 and my MK1L, the larger version that I haven't made in years, and we came up with the MK16. That was our first collab. I ended up flying out there into I don't remember, December of some year, and we made about 6 or 7 of those together. And at that time, I already made about 4 to 7 folders because it was just within that first batch of 7, I remember. And then I made 6 there, so I made as many folders as I made on my own while I was there with him. And that was S125V, and to this day, It's been about 5 years and still the hardest steel I've ground.
Mm-hmm. Man, I bet that was quite the learning experience. Being in a Rob's shop.
It was not even learning experience about working on knives. It was more about shell shock from me being a New York City boy to where he lives in Texas. Go to the
backwoods in Texas, yeah.
I've traveled quite a bit when I was younger, but never to the south. It's kind of like more of North America, California, and internationally. I've never really been south of New York, I'd say, yeah. So I'm flying out there. It's the airport, and it's a 2-hour drive to West Bumblefuck, Texas, off a dirt road to where there's no service whenever it's raining or it's cloudy. It was, and I went out there for 2.5 weeks. It was it was shell shock almost, like giant bugs and all sorts of weirdness. And he's like, yeah, don't touch any water faucets or don't flip over rocks. There's probably black widows. And I was like, oh, cool. So I could die. Mind you, like 15, 16. And I'm just panicking over everything there. Now I've been there about 3 or 4 times and just, it's whatever.
So without telling us, feels the same way coming into the city.
Oh yeah, when he comes to New York,
alleyway,
he's
don't
like,
go down that alleyway.
Yeah, I'm like, don't go down that alleyway when it's dark. He's not used to all the people. But yeah, I learned a bunch when I was out there because I got to see it firsthand. And same thing when I go out there. When I go out there now, since I do stuff in a very different way, I still learn stuff from Rob when he learns the CNC stuff from me. And Rob's very not process orientated. He just get the job done. And when he sees me, I'm very process orientated. Like when he was here for the recent collab, we were working on 30 knives at once, and it's not a simple feat. I don't know most custom makers that work on 30 knives at once. You got to keep everything in order. You got to make sure the parts of the knives don't get mixed up, or it's not going to work because handles are tuned to blades, and blades are tuned, backspacers are tuned to blades, and everything's tuned to each other. So if you mix them up, shit's not gonna work. So I have a lot of custom trays and storage and just the process. Everything's down to the process. Spent about 2 years working on this recent process, and I'd say I'm about 80% there to where I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys do it. Working 30 deep.
It's a thing, especially where now I've never done it with 2 people except my father, and he had his own. My father kind of had dedicated tasks to do on them, but Rob kind of was able. He's my equal, so he's able to do everything I can. So it kind of got a little confusing. It's like, did you do this yet or not? And then like, did you set that lock, or did I set that lock, or was the lock set? That was the only thing, because in the process, I didn't accommodate for 2 people being equals and kind of being able to do every part. So we kind of were losing track on what got done, what didn't get done, but thankfully we didn't mix any parts up. Things just worked.
Cool. So you and Rob have worked on how many collaborations so far?
3 at this point. The MK16 we made a couple of. The BBM we made about 40 of, which was market wise it was a freak show for us, because that knife it had a cult following. It was weird, like a $600 knife because $1,200, $1,400, $1,500 on the secondary, which has never happened to either one of us. That knife had its own cult following, and it just blew up. People find that knife as a huge success. Yeah, marketing wise, and what the knife became was a huge success. But to us, it was a pain in the ass to make. Just the titanium handles, the titanium was bad. We had water jet delays. For us on our end building them, it was a shit show. We got them done. They all worked great, but we were stressed out. Things didn't fall together. People who made promises didn't meet those promises. Deadlines weren't reached with us. So like when Rob came here for 3 weeks, we didn't get parts until about 9 days in. It was a shit show. Thankfully, our recent collab we just did, the MK1 RC, went great, smooth sailing. We were pretty happy with that. And that was the point of that collab, was just that knife is pretty much a clone of my knife. That the handles, everything is the same. We just added a little scoop on the back of the harpoon to make it look like his P40, I think, P90. I think it was P40, but it's pretty much my knife. Like the parts are interchangeable, but the point of this collab wasn't to make a new knife. It was to test the process. It was my new process, and then for me to incorporate him, so that way for future collabs, because obviously doing collabs together when you're flying out to each other's shops are not cheap. He's leaving his shop, and he still has bills to pay there, and he's flying out here. Things have to work, and it went pretty well. There's some tweaks that I figured out, and the next one should go better, but after the BBMs, we didn't know if we were going to do more. And thankfully, with this collab, we know you're going to see some more stuff from us.
Awesome. Looking forward to that, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have our next one already planned out, and that one is another morph design, so that's a whole new thing. We'll see. Maybe we'll do some more where it's kind of just my design and modify a little bit, so that way, because that was 1 month like notice. Like I was just, okay, you're flying down in the month, cool. Let's do the MK1 modify. Call it the MK1 RC. I already have all the CAD work done, all the fixtures done. So
yeah, your scheduling for that was pretty tight, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was a little hectic. The only reason that worked was because I already had the CAD work done and the files. I mean, the fixtures. But literally, if I'm like, are we doing this? Yeah, cool. I'll be there in a month, and I have to modify the CAD work a little bit to mainly the blade. I had to build my website pre-order system, and which I'll talk about a little later. I had to do all the advertising, the prep work, call my water jetter, call steel suppliers. Everyone's like, "Can you get this to me in 2 weeks?" This, that. I got a guy flying down, and it all kind of the stars aligned. I gotta say, because in a month we got a lot done to prep for about 35 knives. Just worked. Wow.
You know, that collaboration process is not only intense for obviously two different knife makers, but I don't think people realize what goes into things like that, like coordination and logistics, material prep, machining.
Each one's a custom
we witnessed it firsthand, and it was a pretty crazy experience.
Oh yeah, just
witnessing that.
It's fueled by lots of caffeine, cigars, and whiskey. Just make shit happen.
That's the best way. That's how knives are made. Yeah.
If you didn't know.
Yeah, but
a lot of cigars.
Like the BBM and the MK1 RC, like they're all about 35, 40 knives. Each one was a custom order. We didn't make them how we wanted. Like I had a custom order sheet. Each one was custom built to spec. And I take a lot of pride in my order process. Like I put a lot of time into I'll give you an order list, and you're going to have every single option I order, and it's a pretty big list of options, which some guys love and some guys hate because then they can't make up their mind. And there's a price next to every option. Something I started this about 2 years ago because I always saw the custom order process was always a pain in the ass. I'll have a customer send me a picture of another knife and it's like, can you make it look like that knife? Or I want the blade to look like this knife, the handle to look like this knife, the clip to look like this knife, and it was always be a pain in the ass.
Don't you have some individual tastes? Go on.
Well, that was always kind of how it is. It's like they can't tell me what they want, and I also didn't have set options.
Yeah, people are very undecisive.
Yeah, and it's usually until you start making a bunch of knives, and you usually look at my past work.
Yeah.
Or usually someone shows you something and you make it like that. And I kind of eventually came up with a whole list. I spent a lot of time. Now, if I could just kind of transfer onto the next model, it takes me a couple days. But I probably spent a good month on my website building out this list and options.
I've seen your website. It makes sense. As a dealer who's gone to order from custom makers in the past, I do a lot of exactly what Elijah said, which is I just Google pictures of old knives they've made and been like, hey, I like this part, I like this part. Like, can you do that? So, I mean, I do appreciate Nick's attention to detail on the ordering process when it's like, you know, every single thing is lined out.
Then you gotta ask what the price is, and they're just like, I don't know. Let me count that up, and then they'll tell you 1,200, and then like you ask them a week later, and they'll tell you 14 because like they're just coming up with the prices out their ass. And I've done that in the past too. Just I don't know what I'll like 1,000 for it. I guess I want 700 for it. I gotta do something. Like my site will never have a set price. Like it's like the backgrounds aren't right. I gotta update a lot of text. I just spent a lot of time on the shop because that was the main point of websites these days. Websites don't matter as much as they used to.
But it's good to have one.
But it's mainly for the shop, but I gotta it's been 2 years since I updated the rest of the website. Like I gotta update the products page, and I gotta finally change that stock background. It's been the New York skyline since ever I built it. I was like, I'll use this for a week. 2 years later, still the background.
I mean, it's not bad.
Yeah, just generic. I need Jeremiah to come in here and take some cool panoramic shots of the shop.
I mean, I'm
3D.
ready. I just this is the year to do it. We've got time, you know. Gonna get in there, do some drone shots of the shop.
No, we have no time and no money.
No, we have no time,
and no drone
money
either. Like we got to get the drone.
Whoa! I got a few drones. All right,
yes,
you guys got to get up on the drone.
Excuse me.
I'm all about the droning, dude.
Need to get one of those. I need to get one of those Mavic Pro Air Drive.
I'm gonna get your 40, Air.
Whatever.
Nick keeps trying to get my Air away from me. He was like, "I'll trade you a slip joint." I was like, "What you
know you want an NCC knife slip joint?"
I know I do because I practically tried to order 6 of them, but I like the Air the most. The Air is my favorite. The Mavic Pro is a bit big, but
that's the one with the Hasselblad, right?
Yeah, the Mavic Pro 2 with the Hasselblad edition. I like the Air. The Air is like a small comp. That's the one I'm going to bring with us to Vegas and to Portland because I want to do some Portland drone shots when we're up at Bill's.
Nice. With the Mavic Pro too?
I'll probably just bring the Mavic Air because it's built for travel. I don't know.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah, like living in New York City, I want to see on top of all these big apartment buildings. Like that's
Good
like the
luck,
mystery of New York.
I will be like at your house in a moment if you fly that shit.
Yeah.
Well,
you said it's just airports. I'm far enough from the airport. I'm like just far enough where I can fly it.
5 miles from an airport beneath probably 300-foot ceiling, which is convenient because that, you know.
So yeah, I can fly. I just want to see the top. Like I live in the area where there's no houses, they're just apartment buildings.
Oh,
so
where you are? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to see on top of all the apartment buildings around my shop, around my house.
Yeah, no
problem. I just think it's interesting because they're all very like I've been on top of mine, and like you see other ones, they're all very unique. And then there's shit up there that you're always like, how the hell did I get up there?
I haven't. Yeah, I do that with houses. Yeah, and you're like, you look at that, and you're like, where did that come from? What century did that land on the roof?
Yeah,
like how did that balloon get up there?
Like you've been to New York on the train system. Like you take the train and you see graffiti in these weirdest places, and you're like,
how did you do that?
Did a guy hang him out the window, holding him by his feet while he was drawing this upside down? Like, how did that get there?
It's a graffiti stick, a lot like a selfie stick, but with a paint can at the end of it.
It's impressive stuff, man.
No, but sometimes it'll be like on the side of a building where it's like there's no way he could do that unless it's a crane, and that's definitely not commissioned work. This guy like rappel off the side of the building, get the hell out of there, because you could tell it's like a local like a street artist or something. It wasn't commissioned work where he had a crane. It's like
he was just messing around to like be like, oh, how'd you do that? Like exactly this conversation. Like, how'd you do that, dude?
Yeah, I've seen some film footage of like my friends using them, and like they find all crazy shit up on top of these buildings. So that's pretty much what I want to do.
I mean, things look different from about 125 to 150 feet. You'd be real surprised. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna bring that to Vegas, and we'll take it up to Portland with us.
Good deal. All right.
Community
got a little
question.
sidetrack there.
Let's see.
We'll get back on topic here with Nick.
Let's see. Wieners and Steel wants to know how much weight did Rob put on during this last collaboration? You can easily say pass.
I don't know. He kept bitching that he was gaining weight, but he was definitely a happy camper eating a bunch of my mom's food. So you don't get normal home cooking all the time.
Dude, side note, I've stayed with Nick and
both stay with me.
Yeah. Nick's mom is
quite the experience.
Nice.
Nick's mom. Shout out to Nick's mom.
Yeah, you have a mom.
You have a Russian Jew mom.
Killing it for the breakfast.
That's a killer host. You got a Russian Jew. It's just you wake up. There's like eggs, 4 options of breakfast, coffee, tea.
4 options. There's like chocolate. There's like all sorts of stuff. It's
a full flight breakfast. So everybody go to Nick's house.
You could sleep on the tent in the shop. That's about it.
Hashtag not everybody is invited. All right. How about
mom?
Yeah, hashtag right. Get your own. All right. Robert Oldiker wants to know best knife sharpener? ? What do you got to say?
By the way, Rob Oldacker makes some killer knives out there in Texas. I got one of his Ninja Stars that I got to post up here. I keep throwing it up at a wall. The ones you guys saw here at the.
Oh yeah, that's the dude from Texas. That's right.
That's Rob Oldacker.
He makes some pretty cool stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I keep throwing that thing and then I forget which wall I threw it at and then it goes missing for a while and then I find it and then throw it again and it goes missing for a while.
Oh, that Ninja Star.
But I don't sharpen my knives on the grinder because. One, if the customer needs to resharpen it ever, he's gonna have to reprofile it. So I use a Wicked Edge, and I love that thing. Just there's probably newer stuff out there. I've had this Wicked Edge for like 7 years. I just change out the stones, but it works. I get a consistent angle. Customers could resharpen the knives easily, and even aside from that resharpening, it looks so much nicer on the Wicked Edge opposed to the grinder edge.
Cool. Let's see here. Josh from PBK would like to know, why did you quit doing adult film? And what is the cost calculation for building a base model?
Good question.
Well, I was on the heavier set category originally when I started the adult industry. Then when I lost the weight, it wasn't as lucrative as knife making. So I had to move on.
Wow. Okay.
A sound investment, yeah.
Yeah, that's legit. And what about the second part of the question? How do you calculate the base model? The hardest question.
That's the hardest question ever. I gotta say, I think I got it a little better. So first off, it starts where I look at the 3D file, I come up with a process to machine it, and then I have a base hourly rate my machine needs to make per hour when the actual spindle is running to compensate for tooling wear, coolant cost, electrode cost, wear and tear on the machine. And that's where it starts. It's first the machine. When I do all the programming, it tells me exactly how long it takes to machine those parts. Usually add 20% for the time of putting the parts in and out, setting up the machine. So it says it's an hour, then it's an hour and 20. But just an example, that gives me the first price. So let's say I'm just throwing numbers out. Let's just say now it starts $200 just for machining. Then I do the whole cost calculations for what it costs to make the knife. Usually it's anywhere from $50 to $100, depending on the size of the knife, the way you need to fixture it, the materials, the thicknesses, the processes that need to be made. But that varies. Like I said, it's anywhere from $50 to $100. Now, there's this whole thing of what's my name worth at the moment, let's say. So that there's a price you slap onto there. Usually you slap that on after you have your base price. So it's what you need to make, and then it's like, what's my demand? Let's say, well, you can't get a knife from me anyway. There's the value. There's a secondary market. So I sell a knife for $600, but the secondary is $900. So these people are making 50% on the knife. It's a lot of money. Oh, let's put $100 on my base price. Let's make it $700. He's still making $200. He's happy. I get to charge on $100. But then there's that whole order list that I mentioned that I'm pretty proud of. Usually my base price is pretty low, and that's just for the basic Chanford, everything sandblasted, stonewash. But there's a ton of options, and every single option has a price. And that's mainly, I'm pretty good at setting the pricing for the options. The base price takes a little while, but like that's what goes into it. I calculate the machining cost and the in-demand factor of and the amount of years and the quality of my work. You look at the secondary. You never meet your secondary. Like if people are selling your knife for $1,000 and you sell your knife for the $1,000 from you, that's a quick way to go out of business. Because like I always say, people buy knives. Like people don't just buy custom knives because everyone's a millionaire. In reality, most of our customers are college students, people who have normal jobs who can't really afford to buy all these knives. But the reason they do, it's also kind of a placeholder for your money. You buy a knife for $1,000. If you don't destroy the knife, you know that you're probably gonna either break even in 4 months when you're bored of it, or you need money. Maybe lose $100 if you made the bad choice in the maker, or make a couple $100. Sometimes you buy a knife for $600 and you have it for 6 months, and this guy became really popular, and now it's worth $1,200. That's just called a good investment.
Yeah, no, that's true.
That's how. Yeah.
People buy this stuff and they know that it's the money they put in can definitely be extracted from the item as long as it's well taken care of.
Yeah, it's like why do people, like I say, like people all the time, like, oh, why is someone going to buy your $700 knife and not this $20 knife at Home Depot? And I'm like, it's people don't buy my knives because they're the best knives in the world. You ask me what's a really good high-end knife to buy? Should I buy one of your knives to use? I'm like, not really. You want a really good knife? How much you want to spend? $100? A company called ZT Kershaw. It's $100 also ZT. If you want a really good high-end knife to use. But besides that, customs, it's not why people buy them. They buy them to enjoy them. Sometimes they want to use them. If they use them and carry them, like when I collected, I used most of my knives, and I considered it man jewelry. It's like, why do you have a watch? You carry your watch, it gets scratched, but people see it. It looks nice, looks good on your wrist. Knife looks good in your pocket, and it looks good when you use it. Just makes you happy when you carry it. But majority of the guys don't carry them. They just keep them in their Pelican case and flip them at the TV. But they know that it's a placeholder for their money. Same thing like people buy gold. Why do you buy gold? You're hoping the value is going to go up, not down, or it's going to keep its value. So it's a way to not spend your money because you have it. So you just put it in gold. And if you have gold, you can't always just spend it instantly. You have to transfer it into cash. But just a placeholder for your money, and hopefully an investment if you buy the right people, the right knives.
Yeah. No,
you have fun in the process.
Yeah, exactly.
See here. Mikhail 39B wants to know BBMS ? Exclamation point, question mark.
Exclamation.
BBMs. A couple guys asked that question. Me and Robert get that question almost daily in our email and Instagram, all over the place. Like I said before, that knife kind of just had its cult following, and everyone wants one. Maybe we'll make some down the line. There might be a possible production run coming out soon with that. Not going to talk about that right now. But because we don't know if we're going to make more customs. Maybe we will. But sometime this year, there's going to be a production run with soon to be announced manufacturer, I guess. But more on that later.
So unconfirmed. Yeah, that's very tantalizing for the BBM fans out there.
I guess let's say here I haven't announced it anywhere, so I guess I'll make an announcement. So some point this year, manufacturer to be announced. I'm already working on it. There will be a BBM production with a couple variations.
Oh, what?
Yeah, and you don't get it. No, I'm joking. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully, I'll have some information mid-February for that.
Nice.
Big announcement.
That's good.
Big news.
If we had a soundboard, there'd be like a boom,
an explosion.
We're not knife nuts, and we don't have that money, so
we don't have that kind of production.
Hey, come on,
Jeremiah. Production value.
Where's our
I'm
soundboard?
working on it. Okay, I'm not Dave over here. I'll get a soundboard.
Insert explosion.
Yeah, insert explosion here.
Now.
I wouldn't be happy if you have a soundboard. By the way, Jeremiah does our editing. Awesome.
I do.
But I think we all need a soundboard. I think all of us. Unless they're really expensive. I don't know what they cost, but I feel like we all should buy ourselves soundboards.
It's definitely going to happen.
So we have free reign of just explosions and
just at any moment during the podcast. Whoa, boom.
Because I'm definitely going to abuse that thing the first time I get it.
All right. We'll put that on the list. Soundboards for 3 soundboards for Bladeology. All right. Yeah. What about EDC fixed blade market? KF Zofa wanted to know what's the possibility of a more EDC-able fixed blade? Does it have to do with the sheath styling or the mounting of the sheath to the waist? What's going on with that?
So I remember this question on the post about asking questions. I'm not exactly sure what he was asking, just my opinion on the market or what, or if I'm making some. So I'm just going to answer as if, do I plan on making some? And yes, I do have a design for about 2 3/4 inch kind of EDC neck knife size, and about 3.5 inch for just EDC and around the house or camping use. And the reason for that is my dad's been working with me part-time for the last year on weekends, and I'm happy to announce that he's most likely going to be full-time with me by the end of February. Obviously, because of quality standards, there are custom folders and locks and mechanisms. I can't have him do most of that work. He does some of it, like finishing and tumbling and sandblasting. But all those, as I mentioned before, those trinket knives, he does most of that work. The Kiridashis, the pods, all the Kydex work that I've done, my dad does that. So I'm probably going to be making some EDC fixed blades very soon. The variation of blade shapes and handle materials. So that way, just more work for him, as in Kydex sheets, finishing, assembly. Sharpening, not really. I got to sit with him and teach him some wicked edge stuff. But next 6 months, you're going to see some ADC fixed blades in various sizes and materials and shapes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely remember before I knew you that well. I think on that infamous car ride down to Blade Show probably 2 years ago now. You sold me in the truck a Kiradashi, and at the time I thought it was a very token purchase, but I came to really enjoy it. I mean, it's a very practical, small, like almost thumb drive USB size fixed blade that I drop leg carry like all the time without even thinking about it, and actually like use it quite a bit. It's very practical, actually.
You saying USB was actually my motivation. If you see it, just very straight and linear.
Yeah.
Two reasons why it's super straight and linear. One, USB, because the Kydex sheet, you kind of just pull it in, use it really quick, like as if you put it in the computer, and then you put it back in. It's there. It's on your keys. You forget about it. 1-inch blade. It's also 01 tool steel at like 64, 65 Rockwell, which you should never do on a knife. But something like that cuts cardboard and paper, it'll hold the edge forever. Like you're not going to be using that in a way to where hopefully you're not going to chip it or snap it because it has a very fine tip. You're not supposed to pry with it. So I made it super high Rockwell that you wouldn't use on a folder, just so that way it holds the edge for a while, cutting cardboard and paper and tape. But like I said, the reason that it's the size it is as a USB, and I needed to make it as a budget product, and I was offered a lot of precision ground one that was rectangularly shaped. So there was supposed to be minimal work on it, making a bunch of them, make a whole bunch of variations, and it seemed like a great dealer product.
No, it's a very cool little knife. Like I said, I EDC that all the time, actually, and I cut a myriad of different things with it while in the field. So it's very cool. This next one, I'll go ahead and jump on this, even though it's Elijah's turn. Human Reason wants to know, when is the Elijah X NCC collaboration going to happen? When are you guys going to work on a knife together?
I don't know what he's talking about. Me and Elijah.
I have no idea who Elijah is, which is weird. Does anybody know who Elijah is?
I don't know, because me and Elijah are both kind of 50-50. We don't know the exact story, so we're not getting too in-depth on this. We do talk about it, obviously, because we do our podcast together. We hang out all the time at all the shows.
Holy shit. I didn't even realize.
But we are talking about it. Something's going to happen eventually. And
happen eventually, one day.
Like I was mentioning before, we're going to talk about the collab.
Future.
Something month from now, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, I don't know. Something. But like I mentioned, that the Tantos get a little annoying to grind when you're doing a bunch of them in full time. And I told Elijah specifically, I want some. Like every time I try to design something, it's always a Tanto. Unfortunately, well, 75% of the time it's a Tanto, and I'm trying not to do a Tanto, so I can do a single bevel and a swedge. And
I do believe I've only designed maybe 2 or 3 Tantos in my life. So
I told him, like, it's perfect. Just don't make it a Tanto, and I'll grind it and we'll make it. And so at some point we'll be doing something. We don't know.
So it's inevitable.
Yes.
Got to combine that Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry.
Yep.
Have it collide.
It's gonna have a harpoon that I was like my mandatoriness.
Yeah.
Or he's probably gonna send me something and I will be adding a harpoon to it.
It's either gonna have a harpoon or 3. Who knows?
Like 3 or 4 harpoons.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be called the never mind. The tri-automatic.
Oh.
The tri-automatic action bell.
It's gonna have a tri-automatic action.
Tri-automatic.
It's gonna be on both bearings and washers, and have a flipper tab and thumb studs on bearings. Right. And be an automatic and also a balisong.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for a knife that's also using anti-gravity technology to be a tri. Essentially, there's a basis for custom knives that needs to be held up through the process, and I think those are good ways to do it.
Yep. Fucking aliens.
You got to bring in those interstellar collectors,
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So, on to our next little morsel here. K. Jovalent would like to know if you're going to bring back the MK1L.
Hey, Leon from Sweden. I had a couple guys ask me about that lately. MK1, so when I made the MK1, I was gonna follow, because back then I designed this thankfully, because I won the Hinder and I built my shop and doing market research back then. A lot of guys would design a knife, and if people really like that knife, they'd start designing it in different sizes. Like the Hinder had 3 or 4 sizes, I think 3, and I made the MK1S and the MK1L. The S is the flagship one that I make to this day, and that's a 3 3.25 inch blade. MK1L is a larger knife, but what I did was I kept the same ratio width-wise. I literally just added a 1/2 inch to the middle of the handle and 1/2 inch to the blade, and just made it longer. So it wasn't proportionally bigger, it was just longer. So it was almost kind of like some guys called it a pocket katana. It was a very slim, long knife that was a Tanto. I'm thinking about bringing it back, but like I said, I've been trying to do my other 3 folders for the past 1.5 years, and somehow I keep coming back to MK1S, and like I want to make something else. And I do plan on doing some production knives with collabs with OEM manufacturers this year. Either next year there might be a custom MK1L, or you're going to see it in a production fashion.
Now, I don't know if it is something that you do or don't want to talk about, but I'm going to interject. Do you want to tell us the story about that particular MK1L that I know that you carry? There's kind of some interesting backstory to that one.
I don't carry it. It's just been in my case. I keep wanting to sell it.
Yeah, in your Pelican.
But I keep keeping it for the story, and 2, I feel like eventually I'm going to want one of my old knives. That's the oldest knife, because the only one older than that, a local collector had it, then Arizona Custom Knives had it, and then I haven't seen it in 3 years. So I feel like if I sell it, I'm not going to be able to find one of my first 3 knives. It's the second knife I ever made, folder, I should say, and it has black titanium handles, and now a bunch of guys have done it, but back in the day when I made that knife about 4 years ago, I believe the second person to ever do it, the first being Frank Fisher, and he told me how to do it, and he said, please don't share the process. And it worked out successfully, because it's a very risky process that I don't offer anymore. Most guys don't do it, because about 50-50 chance of the frames warping and fucking up. And then you scrap the knife, because the knife that I made right after that was black tie, and I fucked up those handles and said never again. The knife sold. There was an auction, and there was another motivation that pushed me towards full time. Was a knife like that would have probably been $600 for me, $650, and I got $1,500 for it in auction. Because 2 guys really wanted it and went in the bidding war. Fortunately, the knife got lost by USPS. I didn't know how to handle the scenario because I don't know if the guy was lying or not, because the knife said delivered, but he said he didn't get it. I was young, and so this was when I first started. I was probably 16 years old. Maybe 17 at the time. I don't remember. It's been like 4 or 5 years, and it's been 5 or 6 years actually. And I got lost. I didn't know how to take it. The guy told me he has this vast collection, but his Instagram didn't have any photos of knives. I didn't know what to believe him, and he gave me some references. Luckily, one of the references was a buddy of mine. Gave him a phone call. He said, this guy's legit. If he said he didn't get it, he didn't get it. Since I was new and I got paid twice as much as I would have sold a knife for, I felt it was only right to make the guy a brand new free knife. That's what I did. And then 2 years later, I got a text message at like 2 a.m. saying, is this knife really worth $1,500? And I was in bed. It's 2 a.m. I kind of brushed it off till the morning because I looked at the photo quickly and I was like, oh, it's just the replace. I guess the guy sold the knife. The replacement I made for him. Woke up in the morning, then remembered the replacement was a satin ground blade and not a 2-tone acid wash blade. Realized that was the original one that got lost. After talking to that guy for about a day, trying to buy it from him, he was being a little reluctant. I was like, look, I could have taken legal action, whatever, got it because it was stolen mail. I told him, look, I'll just give you $250 for it. I just want the knife. He was trying to get $1,000 out of me. He's like, no, it's sold for $1,500. I was like, look, take legal action, get it for free. Also, that knife would have been $650 from me. I'll offer you $250. I see that it's rusted and scratched. I don't know what they did with it. I just want it for nostalgia reasons. And this is longer than 2 years ago. This was about 4 years ago. It was 2 years after the sale of the knife. Eventually, he's like, fine, I'll sell it to you for $250, and then he wouldn't tell me what he got for it. Once I got the knife in, he got his money. I was like, look, obviously, I already paid you the money. I have the knife. I'm just curious, how'd you come to this knife? I didn't know if he stole it or what. Yeah. So he was some prominent guy who was known in the high-end yo-yo market, and he said he's traded a $50 yo-yo for it and $30 cash for some guy trade. Yeah, the kid said he got it from his uncle. And then the kid traded it in the Facebook group for $30 cash and the $50 yo-yo.
Dude, that is a legit deal on his part.
So his uncle probably stole it, and then gave it to his nephew, and then his nephew traded it for a yo-yo, and then I overpaid for it, and now I still have it. And I keep thinking, should I sell it? Because I've refinished it at this point, and every time I want to sell it, because there's two guys that kind of always want to buy it because it's such an old knife, and it's I've only made 5 MK1Ls, and every time I want to sell it, I'm like, nah, I feel like eventually I'm gonna want one of my originals just to compare, and I'm just not gonna be able to find one because the one that I EDC every day is about the 5th or 6th knife I ever made, but after the 5th knife, I sat down again and ground about 20 tantos, and from the 5th to the 6th knife, you can't even compare the quality of the blades. So like you looked at the knife that I EDC and that MK1L, the second knife I ever made, and the blade grinding quality is like night and day. So I feel like I have to keep one of these like first ones just for future records.
No, I definitely, having handled that specific MK1L from your Pelican, I like it. The size is like enjoyable.
It's a large knife. It's very slim and
it's giant. But I can definitely over the time I've handled it and then handled more of your newer models, I can definitely see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
vis-a-vis finishing, the action is smooth, but the finish on the blade is like, it's noticeably different. It's not bad, but it's noticeably, the new ones are an improved style. But I kind of do reminisce. I don't know. I like the slightly larger version. It's cool. I think your modern small versions are neat.
I like it. It just,
I mean, don't ever fucking sell that thing. I swear to God.
You can't sell one of your first knives.
Yeah.
No.
That knife has
it's
so
been in that
much
Pelican
cool
case.
Story.
Yeah, it's been in that Pelican case for like 4 years. I made a guy replacement knife, then I bought it back, and then, like I said, the handles on it are perfect. I'm fully happy with those chamfers. The action's great. It just, the blade grinds a little wonky.
That knife is priceless, dude. It has such a cool story, like behind, like, losing it and getting it back. Like,
the guy who asked that
stories
question,
are priceless.
The guy who asked that question actually has a bunch of my knives.
Is that your Swedish customer?
Yeah, so he has a bunch of my knives. He's a great supporter.
Okay.
I talk to him all the time. Him and his buddy Kim, two great dudes. And I've contemplated once or twice to offer to sell it to him at like less than what I sell my knives at currently, just because I'm not happy with the blade. It is refinished, because I know he's gonna have it for a while. I haven't really seen him resell any of my knives. Then every time I talk myself out, I don't like, I have to keep it.
It's just too special, man. Like, you can't ever remake
this
the
podcast. He's gonna text me. He's like, so can I buy that knife?
Inevitably.
And I'll be like, no.
Absolutely. No, you gotta hold on to it. Community question.
Can't sell that.
50 Shades of Slash, who we all met at New York Custom Knife Show, wants to know.
He's a local guy.
Yeah, he's a local dude. He's cool. He's got the only other direwolf from Reese, the ones that I don't have. He wants to know when you're gonna build a big knife, because they do, like, he has a collection of very large knives.
Okay, and by big knife, he doesn't mean like that MK1L. That's a 3 1/4, like 3 3/4 blade, which he actually wants an MK1L because he said it's still big enough. But no, he means like he wants a folder with like a 6-inch blade and a 1/4-inch blade and like overkill big. And yeah, it's probably not gonna happen. Maybe down the line when I get bored, because like, I talked to Jeremiah and Elijah about this when they were at my shop, that since I've been full-time for about 4 years, it's not that I've been losing the passion for it. It's more like it's a full-time job, so it's making it day in and day out. And as a kid, this was my dream, was to have a fully out-rigged shop so that I could build whatever I want to as my hobby. Like, I wanted a house with a garage and have a woodworking shop. And now that I have technically that, I have a full-on shop, I haven't made anything for fun in ages. Like, the last thing I made was the sword, and that was about 4 years ago. Before that was an axe. And I told them after they left, I was like, probably every 2 to 3 months, I'll be just making a fun project. And right now I'll be making battle songs, but that's going to be a product line. So in the beginning, it's going to be fun because it's going to be new and something different. But eventually, it's going to be the same thing over again. So I'll be making enough to where it's like, okay, it's just about being business. I'm not lose the passion for it. Just to be the same thing day in, day out. So who knows? Maybe I'll make an overbuilt knife as one of those every 3-month projects, just because as the hobby part of being a knife maker, to where it's like for the joy of it.
Right on. He also wants to know what are the future collabs? What do you got working on now or in the future that we can look forward to?
Currently, literally, as right before the podcast and right after, I'm still working on the Rob Carter collabs. I'm actually grinding some in the grinding room. We talked about there's going to be some stuff in the future with Elijah. There's another project me and Rob have lined up this year. It's another model, and that's a full another collaborated model, not like the MK1. What else? I will be. I just did a collab with John Gray. I have another one that I just sent him parts out for, so maybe there'll be another collab. Maybe we'll have it with him in Vegas. I'll be making bow songs and sending them to a couple guys. Most likely Ian, CMF Metalworks will be grinding some of those, and some other guys that I've been in contact with. Just a bunch of stuff. I like doing collabs. They're fun. The only person I do collabs regularly with in proper batches is Rob. I guess Elijah, that'll be a proper collab once we get that going. I'll be doing. I'll be making, manufacturing, and building the knives. It's his design. Besides that, just I'm always down for a bunch of the one-off collabs. They're just fun. There's something different. It's nice to see someone else build your knife in their grind style and finishing style. Like when I saw the John Gray knife when he made it, it was weird because it was entirely different than something I'd make. Like it was an entirely different style than my work because he made that very linear knife somewhat organic.
That was a neat collab you guys did. I liked that. Seeing that in Kentucky was cool. It was very oddball. Very, very unexpected. You know, John's style with your action. I gotta say, I kind of dug it. I kind of liked it. Yeah.
Pretty sweet. Yep.
Yeah. Maybe one of these days we'll get around to finishing that Nuck, but it's probably never gonna happen. So.
Oh yeah, and then with Jeremiah, just for fun, because we, like I said, we always talk and always wanted to make one, not just a Nuck, and mainly just to test out machining patterns and play with a whole bunch of different materials. We're gonna get around to it at some point, but maybe in Jeremiah we'll be doing a Nuck, and I approached him about it because we talked about in the PBK episode his other brand Impera. He made a really cool like 2-finger Nuck with a split Nuck mechanism where it's split into 2 individual Nucks with magnets, and I thought it was cool, and I wanted to do a single finger version. So at some point we'll be making those as well.
I'm excited. And, I think the single finger will be really neat, very, very pocketable.
And then this year I'll be starting, I guess, I don't know if it's collab or what, but for 2 years, I've been trying to do an OEM production line of some of my stuff. It'll be most of my custom designs, except modified to a different size or somewhat. They won't be exactly like the customs, but it's been 2 years in the making, and this year it's finally happening. I will have a side OEM production line.
That is awesome. Wow, that's actually pretty big news.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's the first time I announced it. The people I talk to normally, they know about it, but I guess this is the first time I publicly announced it. Probably still won't announce that on my Instagram until I get more information with the BBMs. But yep, once I get the final information on the BBMs and the OEM manufacturer settled, I'll be talking more about it on Instagram. So I guess this is a Bladeology exclusive.
Damn, that's why we need that bomb drop sound effect.
God
damn it!
Explosion!
Boom, 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 boom. That was not as cool as just having a sound.
Yeah, that was awful.
That was not great.
It's funny.
Edit that out and just soundboard in the explosion.
Edit it in more.
Boom, 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 boom.
Just put in dubstep right there and we'll be good.
Yeah, right. That was the last of our community questions. So before I totally space out on all of them, does anybody want some mezcal?
I'll take some.
No.
Sure.
Okay, I'll just pass them over there. I had a couple of questions about heat treat and about etching Damascus properties and sole authorship pieces. So specifically, how I think that people underrate the importance of heat treat. Kill me with the heat treat. Talk to me about how important heat treat is.
Well, heat treat's everything, mainly because if the knife's not hardened, it's not going to hold an edge. Also, if the knife on a fixed blade, a heat treat, it's aesthetically going to be a fixed blade, and if you use it, it's not going to hold an edge. On a folder, if it's not heat treated right, it actually won't functionally work after a short amount of time, because if the blade isn't heat treated on a folder, the lock will just keep wearing into the lock face and actually be pushing into the steel and deforming the steel. And eventually you'll have 100% lockup really fast. as well as the stopping track from opening and closing, you're going to start mushrooming out your track. And you're going to also lose your detent, because what's going to happen is you're going to start wearing in a giant track into your detent and also putting a ramp into the detent hole. And your bearings are also going to wear through. So like eventually, if the knife isn't heat treated right, it doesn't have to be even heat treated properly to 60 Rockwell. Like even in the 50s is fine, but let's say if it's unheat treated, the knife will mechanically just stop working because it'll just wear out. Just so even aside from holding an edge.
Everything you're talking about has nothing to do with cutting anything. It has zero to do with edge retention or like nonsense like crucibles, metal, steel, German tool steel. This has to do with just mechanical operation of a folding knife.
Yeah, you're talking about stuff interacting with itself. Metal against metal. It's something's gonna give.
It's gonna wear out. Whatever is harder is gonna wear in the small thing. For example, blade steel, usually you're looking at about 60 Rockwell. Titanium, I could be wrong. It's been a while. I think it's about 42 Rockwell. Ceramic detent and balls and ceramic bearing balls are about 95 Rockwell. So what happens is you have and then raw steel before it's hardened is about 35, 38. So at the softest, before you harden it, the steel is the softest item. And that's where all the mechanics are working on, is against the steel. So it's going to be the first thing to wear out. Now, if let's say if it's not hardened, now the titanium lock face is harder than the steel blade. It's going to start mushrooming out and wearing away your steel. On a traditional knife, well, that's hardened and right. I mean, a knife is done right. It's hardened. The blade is 60 and the titanium is 42. But titanium also has there's just beautiful properties about it, and the reason we use titanium, it's very springy, it bounces back. Steel doesn't, so you push against it, it's going to stay where it is, and it's going to deform. So it's going to start mushrooming out. Titanium, it's going to push it away, but then once you unlock the knife, it's going to push back. This is something you're never going to see, but on the micro level, that lock face will keep bouncing back. It is softer still, which will cause stick and going and wear, but and insanely, like let's say let's say 10 to 1. It's a number I'm pulling out of my ass. But if a knife is not hardened, it's gonna wear out. Like while I'm building a knife, if it's not hardened, you can see where every couple times you open it and close it, you physically see the detent track being worn in, the bearings rubbing in. You could open a knife 100 times, you're barely going to see any wear on the lock face. But also, we counteract that by carbidizing our lock faces. And it's just a very thin carbide layer, but that's about 70 Rockwell. So that's counteracting. So now it's almost as hard as the blade, and they're pretty close enough to where they're not putting excessive wear on each other. And now that the blade is hard, now the ceramic is still harder than the steel is. But when the steel is hardened, you do something called cold rolling. It'll slightly wear in, but when it's hardened, it'll kind of cold roll and become denser and polish out to where it actually stops wearing. And the ball bearings don't really wear in as much. The detent ball doesn't wear in as much. It's most likely still wearing, but on such a microscopic level compared to where you open the knife once or twice with ceramic bearings and detent, you see it physically dig in a track that you could feel with your fingernail. You could open it 500 times when it's hardened, and you probably won't even still feel it with your fingernail. It's just very minimal at that point. So mechanically, a folder, you can't send it out if it's not heat treated right. A fixed blade, technically you could send it out if it's just going to be an art piece on the wall.
Right.
But it won't hold an edge. But like that is just so important that besides holding an edge mechanically in a folder. Also, if a knife isn't heat treated, it's twice as likely to rust because I'm not a metallurgist, so I'm not going to get too much into that. But the grain becomes tighter once heat treated, and it's less likely to rust.
Oh, I never knew that. So, okay. So a heat-treated blade is actually slightly less prone to oxidization than a not heat-treated blade.
Yeah, you look at all the stainless steels that are just sitting in my inventory for stock for making knives, they all have rust spots on because they're just sitting here, and they're not hardened. Right. But I have hardened blades that kind of sit on the wall just as long, and they're not rusty. They'll get rusty if water, if condensation sits on them, but just because they're sitting on the wall and they're hardened, they're not rusting. But just the raw stock that's sitting here, it's all kind of pretty rusty.
What? So like the grain structure must be tighter together? I mean, I know you're not a metallurgist, but
once you heat treat it, you're quenching. So the process is 1920, 1950 average for stainless steel. And there's a video on my Instagram where you could see me actually doing this. You pull them out when they're red hot, And that moment when you quench it between two aluminum plates or oil or dunking in oil, depending on what the recipe calls for, different steels are different, it hardens in that instant. So let's say that ABL, for example, has a 10-second window. So in 10 seconds, you have to drop it from 1925 to essentially room temperature. Or I think it's under three. It's not room. I think it's like under 300 degrees. And in that instant, it becomes hard. And from being red hot to workable temperatures, all the steel settles, and now it becomes hard. So if you take a soft piece of steel, you could bend it with your hand, and it'll take bend it back and forth till it snaps, because steel work hardens. So the more you bend it, it starts to actually harden at the bend, and it'll snap. You look at the grain, it looks like concrete. It looks very porous. But if you harden it, the grain structure tightens up, and you can't bend it. You have to physically try to snap it by putting it in a vise, a press, hitting it with a hammer. But once you get it to snap and you look at that grain, it looks like glass. It's very smooth, not porous. There are some steels that look porous, but nicer steels that we like, modern day steels we look at, we'll find their grain structures. Once you harden it, the structure is almost like glass, which less likely to rust because it's less porous.
When talking about heat treating, I've heard you say this before, and I've talked to other makers, and they talk about this recipe, which is a very interesting thing. And I know what you mean now that I've talked to you about it, but a lot of that comes up when guys are talking about different steels, different knife blade steels, and we have these extensively nerdy conversations about M390, Nitro VAEL, 440, whatever. And we talk about them from a user perspective, from, I can cut all sorts of stuff. But the recipe to get the steel to where we're already talking about using it, what can you sort of give us a better idea of the recipe? So every steel has its own recipe, but can you give me a better idea what that means?
So every steel has a recipe, and I always address this wonderful book by Guy Fieri. And the first rule is slather in barbecue sauce, put it on broil for 325 for an hour.
Okay, I like it.
No,
all right.
No, but
and it falls right off the bone, right?
Falls right off the bone.
Falls right out of the stainless steel foil packet.
Mm-hmm.
No, it does not. It always gets stuck to the foil packet, actually. But
I mean, not when you use the barbecue sauce, though.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lubricant.
Barbecue sauce, but
when Spain has to interact with grease.
But I prefer baby powder.
Oh, okay.
So the trade secret: put baby powder inside that steel packet. Put the blade in there, keeps it from sticking. But generally, there's not one number. Every steel has its own recipe. You usually have to get on the manufacturer's website. They usually have the chart. Carbon steels, generally, you quench them at about 1600 degrees, and then they're hardened. And when they're hardened, every steel has its kind of range, which could be anywhere from 63 to 68, depending on the steel. And that's as what they call as quench. Stainless steels are about 1900 to 1950. Carbons are about 1500 to 1650. And then they're like the same Rockwell as quench. But at that point, the steel is very tight. You have to stress relieve it and temper it and pull that Rockwell down. People always say that it's so brittle like glass where you could drop it and it'll crack. That's a yes and no. In reality, not really, but let's say there's some really tight 90-degree corners, and in the perfect scenario, you drop the knife at a weird angle, and there's a really sharp corner. It could crack right at that corner. But it's very unlikely. If you drop it on concrete in the perfect angle, perfect scenario, the wind is blowing south, it might crack. But
because it's so brittle?
Yeah, it could. Your ass quench, one, it's super brittle because it's a very high Rockwell. Yeah. And two, from what I understand and talking to guys, the steel is so stressed at that point and tight that you need to stress relieve it. So when you're tempering it, bringing down that Rockwell a couple points. So let's say I use ABL, usually at quench, it's about 64 Rockwell. 64, 65, but I pull back the temper to about 61, 62, which is a little high. Usually 59 to 61, but I like it a little harder. So 61, 62. In the same process, in the same time, while you're bringing down the Rockwell to safer range, so it doesn't chip or break, you're actually stress relieving, and then the carbides and the steel and the structure of the steel, everything starts to settle, and as the term goes, stress relieving, and at that point, it's a lot more stable.
If the setting is right, I mean, this is like white girl iPhone
No,
drop
like I
on
said,
pavement,
the wind has
shatter,
to be blowing
but
south.
it's
It has
not
to be
like
190 degree
Tuesday.
angle on the Tuesday, on the winter solstice, on a leap year. It's happened. I've seen it happen. I've never had it happen.
That was my next question. Have you personally ever done that or seen it happen?
Actually, I've had it happen. I haven't pre-ground my blades in 5 or 6 years. I grind everything hard, but I think I ground a Warncliffe, so I had a super fine tip, and it was ground to about a 30 thousandths edge, so pretty thin, and it felt, but I didn't really crack. I broke like the first millimeter off the tip.
Wow.
Yeah, re-grind the tip and you're good, but like that tip is it was tiny. It's a Warncliffe.
Yeah.
So, but that was not normal scenarios, and it probably fell right at the tip, and it broke a little part. But I've seen photos of people who pre-ground it and have a really sharp plunge line, and it's broke right at the plunge line, right in the middle of the knife.
That's far out. I think that a lot of people I talk to, I don't know. The heat treat issue with the mechanics opposed to the hardness. I think there's a huge amount of emphasis on heat treat and hardness as far as edge retention goes, and not necessarily as mechanics go. So I'm absolutely happy to clear that up.
Especially with folders, no one ever thinks about
folders. Yeah. And also for scratching, like if a fixed blade isn't fully hardened and you're not using it, it's one thing. But let's say if it's not hardened and you're just putting it on the wall, but if it's in the Kydex sheet, the Kydex is more likely to scratch it. Just handling it, it's way more likely to scratch. That's also another thing is just scratching wise. If it's a knife that you're not using and not carrying, but even a collector who has his knife in his pocket, at home, he'll still open up the box that has another knife inside of it. And cardboard has a lot of random particles in it. And there could be some odd thing in there. And if it's a softer blade, it's going to be more likely to scratch and make the knife look bad. But I've definitely bought knives, even from production companies. And we talked about a knife in specific that I'm carrying right now that I'm highly doubtful that it's heat treated properly. And I've tested knives with my Rockwell tester that's advertised as 58, 59, and they're like 50. Now 50 is fine for it to be mechanically stable, not wear out, but 50 is not good for edge retention at all. Like 10 points, like 1 point is a big difference. Like a knife that's 58 to 59 is like night and day almost to a knife that's 60, 61. 1 point is a drastic difference in the hardness.
Yeah, we're not going to get into
so 10 is a big
too much of the steel controversy on this episode, because certainly God knows what any of that steel is. It's just been lasered with logos. Moving on to Damascus.
No, I was talking about that. This is even a production thing that happened.
Yeah.
Heat treating is a very scientific process. Like the oven, we're not using kitchen ovens. We're using like $1,500 ovens, because when you're talking temperatures, like you got to be accurate within about 20 degrees to get the numbers you want based on the manufacturer specs.
When you did it at the shop, that was the first time I'd seen it in person, and I watched your oven sort of fluctuate plus and minus like 10 degrees for a few minutes before you were comfortable putting something in there. You were like, oh, you got to let it settle out. And I was like, well, it hit the spec. Like, what's the problem? And you're like, no, you got to let it sort of like fuck around for a couple minutes. And then once it holds that number, then it's safe.
At that high of a temperature, like anything, even like say there's a breeze in my shop, there's no windows, but let's say if there's a window right by the heat treat oven and the breeze happens, it's going to change the temperature. Yeah. It's just such a high temperature, and the ambient temperature around it is 1900 degrees less. So everything wants to pull it away. So whenever you need a temperature, like I needed it to 1950, I wanted to hit that temperature and settle for 10 minutes to make sure that the steel inside is the same temperature, not pulling away from whatever the thermostat says, to make sure the ceramic rock encasing the oven is the same temperature, so that nothing is pulling that temperature away. So if it's out there for 5 or 10 minutes, I know everything is at that temperature and not just the thermostat.
And I'm sure San-Mai is a lot more complex.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Talk to us about Damascus. Let me probe you about Damascus a little bit. Like the understanding of pattern welded steel in a modern sense is certainly, it's a bunch of steel smashed together with a power hammer, and when you dump it in acid or something, it turns different colors. Collectors love it. People love it. I love it. Why does it do it? How does it do it? And what does it take to make that happen?
Okay, so Damascus is essentially 2 to 3. Let's go with 2. Once it gets more past 2, it gets a little different. There's 2 steels of 2 different makeups that are forged into 1 steel. Essentially, if you were a kid, you ever play with Play-Doh, and you start mixing your colors, and before they fully mix, you start seeing the colors swirl together. And that's the 2 different colors kind of being intertwined together. It's pretty much what you're doing with the steel. You stack up anywhere from 3 to 50 to 100 layers, whatever it is, alternating layers, and then you weld them together, put them in the oven to similar temperatures as heat treating. I'm not going to give specific temperatures here because these are all trade secrets for guys their own. And then you do something called forge welding, same as welding, except when steel is at a certain temperature, or titanium or carbon. These are all different temperatures for different things. If you press them together at that temperature, they actually just weld to each other, and that's known as forge welding. You have to do that really quick and in one process, and at that point, all your 3 to 50 to 100 layers are now one homogeneous piece. Now, once it's one homogeneous piece, it's a block of steel. You could leave it like that, or then you start forging it thinner and working it out. Depending on what you do in that forging process, it will depend on your pattern. So there's something called a twist pattern. That's just pretty straightforward. It's an old generic pattern. That's literally you just take that bar that's a block, you pull it out, you stretch it out, and then you twist it, and then you forge it flat again. And that's why it looks like the metal was twisted, because that's exactly what happened to it. There's patterns where you roll it, where you twist it, where you hammer it, where you drill it, where you stamp it. Depending on how you manipulate it will depend on the pattern. Now, at all times when you grind a knife, it's just going to look silver. But the reason you have to use 2 different steels is once you put it in that acid, it's going to etch one steel and not the other. So one of the steels are going to say silver and one's going to say black. Once you etch it, it'll show your pattern based on how you manipulated it. Now, now we talked about this a little earlier, ferric and muriatic. Different acids affect steels differently. Depending on the steel, like you thought everything is just ferric. It's not, because for example, say Damas steel, they're both knife-making steels that could both be etched with ferric. So you hit Damas steel with ferric, it's going to be pretty much black and very minimal pattern. So they kind of wash out into each other. So for Damas steel, you have to use muriatic acid. Now, muriatic acid affects steel differently because steels are marsynthetic and non-marsynthetic. Might be off a little bit with the word, but it's marsynthetic or marsynthetic, something like that.
Okay.
Depending if it's, I don't remember which one's which, but if it's marsynthetic or non-marsynthetic, the muriatic affects one and not the other. So one of them is going to stay silver while the other one turns black. Ferric, the whole marsynthetic or non-marsynthetic thing does not matter. It turns any steel dark. Not titanium, but steel will turn any steel black. Muriatic will only affect, I think, non-marsynthetic or the other one, but it only affects one of them. So you see, for example, steel like Chad Nichols or Vegas Forge, their Damascus isn't both performance steel. So it's not like Damas steel where they're both knife-making steels that both harden. One of them is AABL and the other one is a 300 series, which is not a knife steel, so it doesn't actually harden. And I could be wrong, I don't remember. I think it's the carbon that turns black because of the carbon content, it turns black or something. One of the aspects in the knife steel which help it harden, which make it a knife steel, is what makes the steel turn black. 300 series stainless is more of a basic steel that doesn't have all the same chemical composition of knife steels, and it doesn't harden. And for whatever reason that we just talked about, ferric chloride doesn't affect it. So when you're using one of those Damascuses, you could use ferric chloride because ferric would only turn the knife steel black and not the 300 series. It'll stay silver. Now muriatic, I've never really heard of guys using muriatic on it, but I'd assume depending on what the non-300 stainless is, if you use muriatic, it'll do nothing. And I think ABL doesn't get affected by muriatic. I could be wrong here, but like depending on what the actual knife steel is in that Damascus, muriatic might do nothing, or it might do something cool. But usually, if it's that form of Damascus, use ferric. Muriatic is only really used on Damas steel and Damascus, like production-wise, or people like Rob Carter, Rad Knives, I've dabbled my hand in it a little bit. So hopefully soon I'll be setting up a forge setup, doing it more. Guys that make it themselves in the fuller community at least usually make performance. So it's both knife steels and it's usually both. It's meriotic. Like we talked about the other day, you guys. So I better post photos on it. Probably up by the time this podcast is up. I was actually messing around with using a power hammer and making some performance San-Mai. So essentially,
all right.
It's not being used as San-Mai, where the reason they use San-Mai was the center would be carbon and the outsides would be stainless so that it doesn't rust. I'm using knife steel as the core and knife steel as the jacket. And it's mainly not for performance. It's mainly just a cool factor because it's not really stuff you could normally buy. And for aesthetic reasons, I'm using one that's more synthetic, one that's not. I'm not going to share the recipe. But I made some where the outside will be silver and the core will be black and vice versa.
I think that's pretty cool.
So I'll mess around a little bit of that stuff. Kindly enough, New Jersey Steel Baron let me use their power hammer.
Yeah, when are we going to see any of that? When are we going to see some MK1s built with that stuff?
I literally forged it yesterday. I still got to surface grind it. I got to, and also
so by Wednesday then. That should
by Wednesday.
Yeah,
more like
Friday at the latest.
If I didn't have to anneal it, because whenever you're forging steel and you're done forging it, it's hard. Like harder. From what I understand, it actually gets harder than as quenched because it hardens in that process. Plus, you're work hardening it. So, like for example, a file won't touch it. A bandsaw won't touch it. You can't drill it. You can only grind it. So what you have to do is you have to anneal it, which is like a 10-hour process to get it soft again, and then you can do whatever you want with it. Not get too much into annealing. There's the same thing, recipes and formulas for all this stuff.
Well, part of that is definitely, you see on Instagram or you see on the forums or wherever, like, oh, such and such maker finishes Damascus one way and such finishes it a different way. And a lot of it comes down to people maybe not getting how complicated it is to finish Damascus, not only because of what the Damascus is, what it's made out of, what the heat treat is, et cetera, but like it is not easy to necessarily finish this stuff because you're essentially finishing two different steels at once.
If you want it to look good, you take it to a nice hand rub, and that's each their own. You see some guys that do Damascus really well, and some guys where it's kind of cloudy and washed out because they just leave it as if it's a normal steel and they leave it at belt ground. And there's guys that mirror polish it. There's guys that hand rub it to high grit. To each their own. I can't comment too much on that. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Damascus on my knives, mainly because I don't use it too much.
I haven't seen a lot of your knives with it.
I must have made 5 and my 7 years of making and 4 years of full time, mainly because, like I said, 90% of the knives I've made have been Tantos. You make a Tanto compound ground knife with Damascus, it literally washes out every line. It just looks like a Tanto shaped knife, and you don't see the grinds. In person, you barely see the grinds, and then in photos, they're invisible.
Which brings up a great point that is true in most of that. Yeah. People use Damascus perhaps too often, and it actually just hides your awesome grinds.
That's like if it's a knife that's compound ground or some interesting grinds, Damascus it's Damascus. It's one of those, like what guys say, like I got this, or it's a status thing, or it's this knife costs more. But in reality, you're just doing worse. You're taking away the beautiful grinds the knife maker put into them. Now my out of the 5 blades I made, most of the knives were the Warncliffe. So I don't really offer in my orders Tanto blades with Damascus. I'll use Damascus and stuff like that, but a blade I'm not gonna cover up the hard work I put into. And my favorite thing about my knives are my Tanto grinds with Damascus. I'll still do it. I haven't used much damage steel. I will be trying some damage steel on Tantos. If you're using something like Chad's or Vegas Forge, there's a lot of black that tends to hide it. Even damage steel, some of their patterns has a lot of contrast, where a lot of silver to black. That might make it better. The stuff Robert forges looks great on Tantos because it's low layer. So there's a lot of, instead of it being tiny sections of like a millimeter of silver, a millimeter black, there'll be entire like 1/4-inch areas of silver, then a 1/4-inch area of black. So there's less layers. So there's less going on. So you get to see the grinds more. So I start forging my own materials, which I have some billets here where I forge my own performance Damascus and titanium Damascus. I just have to clean it up. I'll probably reserve that mainly to the Tantos because production Damascus that's out there, none of it that I found so far looks good on a Tanto. It just washes out the grinds.
Now, do you do any like testing on your knives prior to to sending them to users? Any tests at all, like maybe rope cutting or something?
Do a lot of water bottle cutting?
I'd love to say that I do, but I don't. I maybe did. No, oh yeah, not maybe. When I first started, yeah, I did testing. When I didn't know what the hell I was doing, when I didn't know if my hardening was right, yeah, I did testing. I'd Rockwell tested everything. When I tried a new steel, I tested it out. I've tried enough steels where I kind of generally just use the same three: ABL, Nitro V, and CTS XHP, and I know what they're capable of. But back in the day, when I was testing out all sorts of materials, testing out heat treat recipes, testing out locks, testing out geometries and locking system, I did. But there's no reason to test every knife. Every time I get a new batch of steel, I might test the first one, and my testing would just be cut into a 2x4 a little bit. I've seen in the past where there's a bad batch of steel. I usually buy big sheets of steel, cut it up into the bar stock I need, and I have it for a while, and I know and that entire sheet is good. But let's say, for example, I buy my steel from New Jersey Steel Baron. They have to get a batch rolled. And that batch could be 5,000 pounds. I could be off by thousands of pounds here. But let's say it's a giant batch that lasts them 6 months to a year. Next time they order steel, it's going to be rolled differently. And it's probably going to be on a microscopic level or on the recipe. They get a chart. They know how different it is. Let's say it has 3% carbon. Maybe now this next batch has 3.1. It slightly changes. But it has happened where an entire batch was bad. And what happened was they ended up getting a new batch rolled, but it happens. So usually, I know it's a new batch of steel, I'll test the first blade somewhat, just to know if it hardens. Like I remember they had this issue once, and the steel didn't harden at all. And you'd think everything's fine, but it didn't harden. So I'll just test out the first one of that batch. But besides that, I don't test every knife except the lock. I do spine whack every single knife and do some basic lock testing, but steel wise, I don't really.
So I'm going to obviously ask you, when you say rolled, are you talking about cold rolling the steel, or are you talking about something else? And if so, what is that?
Cold rolling, hot rolling, those are different. Like some steels are cold rolled, some steels are hot rolled. It depends on the manufacturer. I'm talking about when the steel is smelted. So you order a batch of steel. I need 20,000 pounds of steel. From what I understand, because I worked alongside New Jersey Steel Baron for about 2 years, so I got to see a lot of their side of the business in the back end, which was pretty cool. Learned a lot of metallurgy from them. From what I understand, they say we need 20,000 pounds of steel. The company's okay, we don't have any of that in stock. We're rolling more in 4 months. We're rolling more in 4 months. So theoretically, the guys at New Jersey Steel Baron should be ordering it way before they actually need it, because they can't always get it. Because from what I said, like the manufacturers set scheduled months for certain steels, and from videos I've seen, it's a giant vat that they pour the different components of that steel into based on their recipe. And I think it's powdered versions of the alloy. It gets boiled. It gets essentially boiled and melted down in the crucible, and then they pour it out and roll it, or however some things are poured out. So there's different steels, like CPM stuff. It's powder. It could be poured. I don't know, but there's rolled, which could be rolled in the hot state. It could be rolled in the cold state. And there's something called PSF, which is actually spray rolled instead of rolled or cast. It's sprayed on almost. It's sprayed layer by layer, almost as if it's 3D printed into whatever size. And I think that's a newer process.
That's far out. Okay. All right. What I got one last question about steel. I know you said you don't, and I know that seeing your knives you don't, but as far as Damascus goes, you don't use a whole lot of it. But looking at the span of Damascus, from the craze of carbon pattern Damascus to your modern San-Mai's and your core and your Damacore, is there any particular Damascus through the last 5 or 10 years by any maker that, if you were going to make a knife for yourself, that you would do over another? Anybody, particularly like Mike Norris, like Hornet's Nest has always been a favorite of mine. Do you have a specific pattern that you prefer over another?
Honestly, my favorite stuff is just the paint to work with, because you have to do a lot of prep work. And maybe I haven't done that on my Tantos. I want to make my own personal knife with it. I just like all the Chad Nichols San-Mai stuff, where it's Damascus on the outside and then specifically the CTS XHP stuff that if I think the CTS stays silver on the core, or like the armor core or stellite core, where the core stays silver and the outside layers are Damascus. But for anyone who's ever worked with it, it usually comes super thick and the core is off center. And it's done like that purposely, so that way there's distortion in the pattern. Then the maker has to do a lot of work to surface grind it to get it center before he even starts making the knife. So I've actually never worked with it except on a fixed blade, and with that one it was kind of center, and I just made it ages ago. But I plan on making my personal knife with it. It's readily available. Besides that, and the reason that one as well, because the core will be hardened, and unlike some of the non-performance Damascus, it's not the best user because there is the not hardenable steel in there. Like Damascus steel, they both harden. It's great. It's good for users. Some other guys, they don't use both. It's more of an aesthetic Damascus and not the best user Damascus. There is some Mike Norris stuff that I like too, but then again, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Damascus because it covers up the pattern. So it'd either be some low layer stuff like Rob makes and some other guys make, because low layer stuff, Chad makes it once in a while. But I'd probably say some of the Chad Nichols San-Mai stuff. I really like the San-Mai because you got the different layers of contrast, and because of the silver layer, I'm pretty sure it's still going to show the majority of the grind. And with my Tanto grinds, so I have the main bevel, the tip, and the swedge, you're going to get this nice silver wrapping around the entire edge, tip, and swedge. So it should look pretty badass.
Right on. I appreciate that too, and that holds fast to your original, function over form, because the center of that is absolutely a steel that will cut shit, and it doesn't. So not only does it look good, but it is MK1.
And like I was making it because I had the Damascus, I didn't even think about it. I was like, oh wait, and when I finished the knife, I was gonna carry it. I was like, oh, but I don't even see this grind. And I ended up doing tumble Damascus. So I threw in the tumbler slightly, and they showed the grind, and it looked great. I'm like, you could see the grind again. And when you use it, it'll hide the scratches a little bit. And I was like, wait, I use these knives hard. Like I cut drywall, I cut stuff again. Like I'll cut, if it boxes staples, I'll hit a staple. My knives like here, I just beat them up. I'll cut against the concrete floor. If I'm cutting something on the floor, I don't really care. And I was like, wait, this is not a good user. I have to make something in San-Mai or Damascus steel. But we talked about this today, actually, how it's like, I feel like most makers have the knives that are like, even the knife that I carry, it's a knife that I fucked up. But most knife makers carry a knife that's fucked up or just whatever is lying around the shop.
Yeah.
I feel like a knife maker should actually carry a full dress knife to be in reality, because
yeah, absolutely. It displays your work. Casuals love it.
You gotta have something to show off.
It's not even for a knife making community, but like regular people who don't know what we do. It's like, wait, you're a knife maker? What does that entail? Oh, I make high-end knives that go from anywhere from $600 to multiple $1,000s. $600 to multiple $1,000, and they're like, what? Wait, what? What do you do again? And you show them photos, and they're like, they kind of get it. You show them the knife in your pocket. It's just kind of usually it's just a tumbled out, messed up knife. I feel like I should start carrying like a nice San-Mai blade, Damascus handles, or something, just full dress. So when you show them that, it's not like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, but it's like, wow.
Oh yeah, it's super bling. It's like, look at this, man. Like I made this. It's high end. You appreciate it, and I also kind of beat the hell out of it.
Yeah, so hopefully when I get some time, maybe before Blade Show, or maybe I will fuck up a full dress knife so it's slightly fucked up so where I can still carry it. It'll go in my pocket, but I want to make myself an MK1 Micro. Being in New York, can't really carry large knives, but so on the 2.5-inch version of the MK1, a nice San-Mai blade and a full Zircotai or probably zirconium scales with mother of pearl inlays or something like that.
Just go
there we go.
Full gambit,
yeah.
Full dress.
You heard it here. If you want Nick to make you something super special, go buy him some of that Chad Nichols San-Mai, and he will probably make it happen.
Get him some materials.
That's right.
Or just bribe me with whiskey and cigars. Either. I think Cuban was always good, but that's a generic answer. Recently, I've been really on the Avos Nicaraguans.
Yeah, I've been talking a lot of those.
They're not rolled. They're kind of like a square press cut. What else have I had? It's pretty good.
Those are like actual square ones?
Yeah, they kind of look like the Javas by Drew Estate, but they're Avo Arturos, Avio and something. I think Avo Arturos. No, it's Avio, so Avo, and then starts with a V. I don't remember, but it's a really good line of cigars. I've been smoking the Nicaraguans a lot lately, and I'm waiting on a box of Cohiba Siglo.
Cohibas?
Cohiba Siglo 2s.
All right.
Well, maybe you could buy Cubans in the U.S. I found them online. It was a good price on the box of 20s. They're a nice shorter stick.
Becoming more prevalent. That's for sure. All right. Well, Cigars and San-Mai. That'll be the name of Nick's biography, without a doubt.
Absolutely. So I think we should.
There's all sorts of nonsense going on in the background here.
We're going at about 2 hours now, I think. Nick, what do you want to end with? You want to round out the history and future of NCC knives and give us a closer?
I don't know. So a lot of new stuff's coming out. I've been delayed on the new folders with MK1, and now that my dad's going to be on full time, I'm working on the ballast songs. So there's not locks there. The fixed blades. Really, I got the slip joints that I really want to make. I got the prototypes. A recent photo you just threw in the WhatsApp looks really nice. And the
that's got to be the best one so far. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's the winner. I nailed it.
And I like to end the podcast on one of my favorite quotes by Chad Nichols.
Nice.
City Sprinkles. And Bladeology out.
Were you waiting for me to stop recording? Was that what you were waiting for?
No, I just wanted a nice pause so that way you could find the ending easily.
Okay.
Cut it. Hopefully, when I said titty sprinkles, it didn't kind of when you.
Oh my God.